Hi, I'm Steve Fox, and this is American Road Trips, the program that explores the scenic back roads and byways of America. We'll be checking out the natural diversity of Northern California, from its dramatic coastlines to its towering redwoods. And we'll meet some of the folks who help give the counties of Northern California a flavor all their own. With San Francisco as our starting point, we ventured over the Golden Gate Bridge and steered north on Highway 101. We paid a brief visit to Healdsburg, set in the heart of California's thriving Russian River wine country, and spent a few minutes relaxing in the town's central plaza. Up this way, vineyards parallel the highway for miles. Hop off any exit, and it'll most likely reveal a winery or two. Up the road near Cloverdale, we took a quick peek at the Russian River, then tightened our seatbelts as we prepared to brave Route 128 west. Midway up 128 lies the strange little village of Boonville. At first glance, it appears to be your average small community, but take a second look and you begin to realize some of the signs carry no discernible meaning. For example, since when is a phone booth called a Bucky Walter?
A Bucky is a nickel, and Walter Levy had the first telephone in the valley, so a Bucky Walter is a pay telephone. A Walter Levy is a domestic telephone.
Well, it's all simple enough for a local bootler, Bob Glover, to understand. We asked Bob to tell us more about this bizarre babble of Boonville.
Well, Boonville started out in the hop fields of Bell Valley. The ladies started it with a few coded words. The men picked it up and then developed it to around 1,350 word vocabulary.
And Bob's favorites?
Almost every one is a favorite word because it is a disguise. It really allows a person to speak in a form of communication that is understood by very, very few people anymore. One is nematode. Nematode. If you and I were sitting down in the Bucket of Blood Saloon in Boonville, and there was no one else in there but us, and we hear the door creak and someone walks in, and we were talking about them, and you had your back, I would say nematode, new man in the joint. It's a merging of all those words. That's one of my favorites of all.
And by the time visitors leave Boonville, they often find themselves harping a little boont as well. Continuing west, Route 128 ends as Mendocino County's spectacular coastline begins. Bob Lorenzen, author of the Hiker's Hip Pocket Guide to the Mendocino Coast, has been seduced by the power of the coast for years.
The coast is hammered by winds and waves and real heavy rainfall year in and year out. It's all soft, crumbly Franciscan rock and sandstone. And as all these forces wear on the coastal headlands, they create an amazing convoluted coastline that winds in and out and has lots of little coves and points. There's lots of short and easy trails here on the Mendocino coast, but in a short distance you can discover a lot of tremendous country, fantastic wildflowers, and just rugged beauty.
In the middle of all this coastal splendor lies Mendocino, a former lumber town founded in 1852 and often shrouded in a perpetual ocean mist. But Mendocino's weather has only added to the appeal of this New England-like hamlet. Though some visitors opt for a leisurely stroll down Main Street, those in the know usually bolt to Ukiah Street as soon as they hit town. Margaret Fox has been keeping various bellies full of good food since opening Café Beaujolais over a dozen years ago. And though her lunch and dinners are extremely popular, it's breakfast that holds a special place in Margaret's heart.
I think people customarily associate going out to dinner with what is done as a fancy dining out experience. But I always feel that breakfast is quite a neglected meal, and it's gotten short shrift over the years. And so, because breakfast happens to be my favorite meal, I like to show it off as well as I can. And people love it. They really respond.
They're also impressed with the flowers from Margaret's garden, adding more than just a dash of culinary color to their meals.
You know, a lot of people from the city really have no idea what the herb looks like. You know, they're used to buying dried herbs, and they don't associate flowers and food. So to find an edible flower and be able to place it on a finished dish is an exciting thing to the customer who's just completely unfamiliar with it.
Margaret and her executive chef/husband, Christopher Kump, work hard to keep their customers happy, but that already seems to be the given emotion around here.
People usually are so happy to get away from the city when they're up here that they imbue all of these experiences with extra special emotion, and they just love being in Mendocino, so I can't take any credit for that.
You know, fleeing fugitives from the big city aren't the only ones who benefit from Mendocino's distinctive atmosphere. Local folks often gather inspiration for their work by simply looking out their window. Take artist Pamela Hahn, for example. Pamela's box art has been deeply influenced by her love and concern for the sea.
I started making ocean pieces after being very politically active in trying to help preserve the ocean here. Mendocino was very active in fighting the offshore oil leases and in promoting ocean sanctuary. What we want is permanent protection for the ocean. And I certainly hope that when people see my work, it might affect their consciousness and that the community work I do is effective, and I think it is.
Mendocino residents are notoriously zealous in their ongoing fight for environmental protection. Though at first glance, this woman appears to be your typical happy homemaker cooking up scrumptious breakfasts for her guests, Rachel Bina, proprietress of Rachel's Inn, usually has a lot more than omelets on her mind.
The two most important aspects of the planet happen to be right here in our backyard. The oceans and the forests are the lungs of this planet. And so we feel a great need to protect both of them because that's how oxygen is formed. That's how we breathe. And here we are in Mendocino County faced with those two major issues, the need to protect the oceans and the forests.
After indulging in the Mendocino experience, it's easy to understand why people like Rachel and Pam are anxious to protect their seaside paradise. Heading north, the long and winding Shoreline Highway takes travelers on a coastal roller coaster. About 2 hours later, the road turns inland, and the Shoreline Highway hooks up with the Redwood Highway, more commonly known as Highway 101. On 101, a whole new feeling begins to emerge. This is Redwood country, and up here you're bound to see towering Sequoia sempervirens from every imaginable angle. One of the most popular pastimes here in Humboldt County is chainsaw carving. Second-generation carver Mark Cope takes old redwood stumps from forested areas and carefully, very carefully, shapes them into his favorite northwestern images.
And the main difference is that you're doing something three-dimensional, not just two-dimensional on a canvas or a piece of paper.
To truly comprehend why redwoods have overwhelmed humble humans for centuries, Avenue of the Giants awaits. Humboldt Redwood State Park Ranger Jim Baird explains.
Okay, what the Avenue of Giants is, it's largely in the park. It's a 33-mile scenic highway that passes through Humboldt Redwood State Park. And pre-1963, it used to be the old 101. And you'll see some of the largest and oldest redwoods that you can see anywhere in California, especially anywhere you can see them without getting out of your car and taking a little bit of a hike. You also pass along the Eel River for many miles. There's a lot of good swimming and picnicking areas that people enjoy using.
Lately, local emotions are running almost as high as the redwoods themselves as economic factions face off against environmentalists.
There's concern on many levels, but one of the things that we're finding is that as far as the old growth redwoods, these stands that have never been logged, there really isn't an awful lot of that left. There's a lot of redwood standing today that is in second and third growth cuts and will continue to be, but we're right on the last few thousand acres of unlogged redwoods, and a lot of people feel that there's a lot of plant and animal species that depend on these old growth forests for their habitat, and that what is left should be set aside, or a portion of what's left should be set aside.
Let's hope there's a peaceful resolution to the redwood controversy in the very near future. We have found it, up near the California-Oregon border, that old fog-ridden town on Humboldt Bay, Eureka.
Eureka, when it was first developed, was a mining town. It was to supply the miners, and the name Eureka came from "I found it." We found gold in the Trinity Rivers. It wasn't too long before they found out that Eureka wasn't as much a mining town as it was a timber town because of the redwoods and Douglas fir that grew into the area. And that's what our mainstay is still today, is timber, with fishing being second.
There's a quick history lesson for you, courtesy of Leroy Zerlang, Eureka born and bred. Leroy took us for a whirl on the Matticat, a historic harbor ferry, now a tour cruiser on Humboldt Bay.
The section of the island that we're now approaching to our right is the only part that is in private ownership. The rest belongs to the state, city, and federal government, and most of it is a federal game reserve. 13 people live on the island year-round. The only way to and from the island is by boat, and the only modern convenience these people on the island have is the telephone.
Though gloomy skies often hover above, Eureka is a far cry from dull. Down by the harbor, Old Town's flop houses and saloons have metamorphosed into vibrant boutiques and cafes. Eureka's dazzling Victorian homes, most notably the Carson Mansion, are among the most admired in America. And Gabriel's Garden, blooming bright in Old Town, vividly displays one man's determination to have a garden despite Eureka's salty air and lack of sun. Best of all, this is the town that lays claim to the Samoa Cookhouse, an old logger cookhouse still serving up lumberjack-sized portions. Some of the folks we met in Eureka encouraged us to visit the historic little town of Weaverville, 2 hours to the east on Route 299. Situated amidst the lush Trinity Alps, Weaverville is home to the state's oldest pharmacy. It also has a place in the annals of California history for its Joss House, built by Chinese gold miners in the 19th century. The word Joss derives from the Spanish word for God, Dios. Now under the protection of the state park system, Ranger Fred Meyer tells how the temple came to be built in Weaverville.
Well, the Chinese were a part of the gold rush, and theirs was a more temporary visitation, or at least I think that was in their mind to be. And as part of the gold rush, they brought their culture with them and created these temples of worship wherever they were allowed to have their mining communities. "45 minutes out of Weaverville on 299 East, Whiskeytown Lake was a refreshing sight on a hot summer day. Up the road, we made our way south on Interstate 5. Then 99 South led us into Chico as a spectacular sunset lit up the California skies. Throughout our journey, the Northern California Handbook proved to be an insightful traveling companion. The author, Chico native Kim Weir, has an unflinching respect for this end of the state.
There's something about the North Coast, like most of Northern California, north of, say, San Francisco, Sacramento, that's almost anarchistic. And it's real interesting. That attitude is reflected in the history, too. Secessionism, rebellions, wars on a neighborhood or local level. And it just comes out in the land and the people and all that's there still today. So I just like that. It's not mass marketed. It's not homogenized. It's not the kind of thing. It's not the typical California myth.
Kim's hometown, Chico, easily dispels images of the typical California myth. It's a place still influenced by a strong sense of history. The Bidwell Mansion, an exquisite display of Italianate architecture, symbolizes the very soul of Chico. John Bidwell's thriving legacy extends into the northern Sacramento Valley, one of the state's ripe agricultural meccas. Though there are more direct routes out of Chico, meandering through acres upon acres of orchards and rice paddies is an extraordinary experience. It's about a 3-hour drive southwest on Route 29 to the town of Calistoga, a sort of earthly paradise for those who believe that wallowing in mud is more than just hog heaven. Calistoga, surrounded by the fertile vineyards of Napa Valley, owes its existence to the late great gold rush baron Sam Brannan, as longtime resident John Wilkinson remembers.
It seems like Sam Brannan was at some festive affair there, had a little too much to drink, and he wanted to announce that he was going to build the Saratoga of California right here in this area. And so he got a little muddled in his voice, and it came out the Calistoga of California. And so that is the best explanation of the name Calistoga that we know, a combination of California and Saratoga.
Doc Wilkinson's Hot Springs has been a legendary part of the community since the early 50s. As a licensed chiropractor, Doc is a firm believer in the natural healing powers of the mud bath.
The bottom line is that the mud bath is a better way of applying heat to the body. It also gives a person a feeling of weightlessness or no gravity. You're suspended right in that hot mud. And those are the two advantages of the mud over, say, just the water alone.
And in these fast-paced times, a soothing mud bath often proves to be just what the doctor ordered.
Thanks, Doc.
Though its hot springs have garnered an international reputation, downtown Calistoga strongly reflects the town's colorful past. And the Sharpstein Museum on Washington Street truly captures the magic of 19th century Calistoga. The late Ben Sharpstein, an award-winning animator for Walt Disney, supervised the making of a magnificent town diorama when he retired to Calistoga. The details on the diorama's tiny models undoubtedly astonishes even the most discerning eye. There's only one way to get a proper perspective of contemporary Calistoga and Napa Valley: soaring high overhead on a Calistoga glider. Back on the ground, Behringer Vineyards is just up the road from Calistoga in St. Helena. There are dozens of wineries in Napa, but only Behringer's has the School for American Chefs. World-renowned culinary educator Madeline Kamen primes professional chefs from around the country on cooking with wine. John Malik was able to obtain a coveted spot in the program.
The School for American Chefs is the only school of its type. It's a professional seminar for professional chefs, and it's right here at Behringer Vineyards. And eventually, you know, as the school gets a few years or so under its belt, you know, the chefs that have been influenced by this program by Madeline Kamen are going to take this back into the cuisine, and it'll help American cuisine evolve into something really distinct.
The Behringer brothers founded their vineyard in 1876, and it's been open for business even during Prohibition ever since.
This is a wine that we only sell here at the winery. So if you like this, it's the only place you'll find it, and it will...
Public Relations Manager Bill Knox understands the secret to Behringer Vineyard's success.
The climate in the Napa Valley is very Mediterranean. And I think, first of all, people like that, to come to see that, to experience that, to enjoy the warmth and be here in the vigor of the vines. It's just a natural match. The other part of that, of course, is that that's ideally suited to producing world-class wines.
We'll head across the Pacific to Hawaii,
basking amid some of Mother Nature's most lavish creations. From the lush pineapple fields of Oahu to the massive lava fields of the Big Island of Hawaii, we'll set out to discover and uncover the magnificent mysteries of our 50th state. So, without further ado, let's take a spin through paradise, shall we? We begin our island adventure in the wilds of Waikiki. This notorious strip of glamour and glitz on Oahu has played the role of Sun Central since the early 1900s. The sizzling scene here may scare away those seeking solitude, but local surf legend Rabbit Kakai knows there's a certain je ne sais quoi here that cannot be denied.
I don't know, it's just a magic. Waikiki has a magic that of its own that draws people. The sun, they look the sunshine out here, the beautiful weather, the beach, surfing, and you read a lot about that, and everybody just, you know, look at it and it says, I want to be here.
Though you're often not aware of it basking on the beach, Hawaii's capital, Honolulu, lies just beyond Waikiki. And though this ever-growing metropolis in the middle of the Pacific is sending up sleek skyscrapers at a mind-boggling pace, remnants of Hawaii's royal past stand as jewels in the city's illustrious crown. One of the best ways to explore old Hawaii is on foot. Glenn Grant of Kapiolani Community College organizes over a dozen different kinds of walking tours around town. We set out at dusk on one of his more spirited creations, the Honolulu Ghost Tour.
Iolani Palace Grounds has many variety of phenomena that take place in the evenings. Fireballs, sightings of spirits. One of the sightings that takes place here is at the Royal Bandstand. This Royal Bandstand used at the coronation of King Kalakaua in 1883. It seems that some mornings that the time that the sun comes up over Honolulu, the guards say that they have seen a woman in the bandstand. She's sitting at a table, she's eating breakfast. It's a fine set table, she's elegantly dressed. They told me that they believe it is the spirit of Queen Liliuokalani, the last reigning monarch of the Hawaiian Islands. Several years ago, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, two men were walking across the Iolani Palace grounds. As they passed this water fountain, they saw something coming up from the pumping station below. She was walking up very slowly, a woman in a white dress with long black hair, and she was Hawaiian. As she gets to the top of the steps here, she calls to them, "Hui! Hui!" They stopped, they looked, they asked, "What is it?" She points her fingers out towards them, and she gestures, "Come here, boys. Come to me. Come here." Well, as they walk towards her, they wondering, who is she? She calls out to them again, and she calls them by their given names. This woman knows their names, and they don't know who she is. So they just took off back to their automobiles, running from here as fast as they could. Well, this woman in white at the fountain on the Iolani Palace grounds is one of the many legends of Hawaii and the mysteries that inhabit our islands.
When people think of Hawaii, they usually don't envision superhighways, but Oahu's got them, and they simply pave a more efficient path from one beautiful spot to another. For instance, just the right blend of modern roadway and beautiful back road has Honolulu travelers on the island's famed North Shore in little more than an hour. And the less time spent behind the wheel, the more time to spend getting wet. This is where you find Sunset Beach, Waimea Bay, Bonsai Pipeline, names that have pounded through the surf world for decades. The faces may change, but in wintertime, record-high waves still come crashing in. World-class surfer Bonsai Betty DiPolito is crazy about this place.
Surfing is great on the North Shore because it not only attracts the biggest, best rideable waves in the world, but it also attracts the best surfers in the world. It's everything for surfing. The North Shore is everything. If you're going to be a good surfer, you come here. And it makes it even more exciting.
Hawaii is one of the most isolated spots on Earth, but hardcore surfers like Betty are here to indulge in their one great passion.
Surfing is surfing. It's a whole different lifestyle. It's a whole culture. It's hard to understand, but once you surf, you'll never not surf. It's the kind of sport that you're kind of one-on-one with nature, and you know, you go out there and it's a challenge all the time, and you know, you go out there, you challenge yourself. You know, when you're riding a wave, it's just the best feeling because it's like a movement feeling. It's like, you know, it's just an experience. It's wonderful.
After hanging loose on the North Shore, we headed, by air of course, across the Hawaiian island chain to the Big Island of Hawaii. The Big Island is more than twice the size of all the other islands combined, with landscapes as diverse as they are magnificent. Our Big Island rendezvous begins on the sun-drenched Kona coast, one-time home of kings and castaways. To get a vivid sense of Kona's rich history, Pu'uhonua-Ohunanau, or a place of refuge on the south coast, provides a mesmerizing look into ancient Hawaii. Park Ranger Catherine Domingo escorted us back in time.
Well, apparently, when our ancestors first came to these islands, they brought along with them this concept of living, which they called the kapu system. And kapu was a part of their religion, and kapus were the sacred laws. They believed that their laws were sacred because they were laws that were governed by their gods and not laws that were governed by the people. And because of this sacredness, there was only one penalty for anyone who broke a sacred law, a kapu, and the penalty was death. If a kapu breaker, however, could reach an area like this, a pu'uhonua, he was afforded a second chance, if he made it.
Coincidentally enough, the kapu system collapsed just as the first missionaries were arriving on Hawaii's shores. Of the many places of refuge that once existed on the islands, Pu'uhonua-Ohunanau is the only one remaining. Our next stop took us high above the Kona coast, where artist-historian Herb Kauai-Nui Kane brings 18th century Polynesia to life.
I'm sort of stuck in the late 18th century in Hawaii. There were a lot of things that happened which were really pivotal events in Hawaiian history, and they may not have seemed important to the participants at the time, but they became important, and they shaped the history of Hawaii. The early contacts with the British and with the American fur traders. The people involved in the events of the late 18th century were interesting people, and through them, through their eyes, we get glimpses of what the original culture was like.
Historic renderings, like the death of Captain Cook, have earned Herb Kane a worldwide reputation. Perhaps it's his overwhelming command of the subject matter that garners such admiration.
What excites me the most is when I feel I've established empathy with my subject. And it's very difficult to empathize with people of another place and another time. In my case, with the people of the 18th century. But by studying them well enough, one can develop an empathy. And when that happens, when that empathy happens while you're working, something magical happens. The brush moves itself. It's one of those aha moments, you know, and they're all too infrequent, I'm sorry to say, but that is what gives me the most excitement.
Before leaving the Kona coast, we stopped by Kealakekua Bay to pay our respects to Captain James Cook. A memorial marks the spot where the famed British explorer met his death as a result of tragic cultural misunderstandings with the native people. Only 45 minutes north of the Kona coast, the roadside topography undergoes a dramatic transformation. Leaving the rugged black lava of Kona behind, we entered into the rolling green hills of the South Kohala district. The famous Parker Ranch, all 220,000 acres of it, has thrived among the lush Kohala Mountains for almost 2 centuries. In the heart of ranch country lies the pretty town of Waimea. Waimea's crisp mountain climate serves as an invaluable helping hand to those in possession of a green thumb. Yoshika Iwamasa's mother unknowingly launched a family dynasty when she started making leis from local flower gardens.
My mother, who came from Japan, always planted flowers, and she just loved flowers. And she actually, being a first generation Japanese, we were surrounded by Hawaiian people who used to make leis. And she liked to do handwork, so she used to make leis. So we follow up, myself and my sister. We all did leis because we followed her.
More than simply a beautiful blending of blooms, the lei is as ingrained in the Hawaiian culture as hula dancing.
When you give a lei, it's aloha. It means hello and goodbye. Please come back. And always you plant the person with a kiss.
There are numerous lei-making techniques, but Mrs. Iwamasa takes special pride in her braiding abilities.
The braiding method is very easy for me, but it seems that the newcomers, when you teach them, they can braid, but set the flowers in to make them to look like a lei, it seems to be very difficult for them. And when it's completed, the person who comes to pick up the lei, they love it and say, oh, it's so beautiful. That makes me feel good.
About an hour from Waimea, tucked in the northeastern part of the Big Island, lies the tropical Shangri-La of Waipio Valley. Lifelong resident Roy Toko shared personal and historic insights with us as we made the trek into the valley.
Okay, here we go. All aboard for Waipio Valley on the Waipio Valley Shuttle. Good morning, everybody. We are exactly 940 feet from sea level. We're going to go down 9/10 of a mile to the bottom. And we're going to be running between an 18 and 35% grade, going down as well as coming back up. This valley is also known as the Valley of the Kings because King Kamehameha the Great was brought up in this valley. Prior to 1941, whenever you came into this valley here, this was just a hiking trail. But when the war started, the Army Corps of Engineers started to hack away on this hiking trail, just widen it just wide enough so they could take their military vehicles in order to fortify the valley. And that was the first movement of four-wheel drive vehicles into the valley. Okay, according to my granddad, he says, the Army Corps of Engineers opened up this road actually not to fortify the valley, but because there were a lot of beautiful women in the valley, they opened the road wide enough so they could get down and see those beautiful women. Largest village. This village is known as now Po'o Village. And when the floods came, it just started to devastate. In fact, that was what made the people move out of the valley. It actually changed their lifestyle. They had to move out of the valley because of the floods. Then the war, and then the tidal wave in 1946 made most of the people move out. Those are taro patches. Then that's the chief produce of the valley. That is taro. We have approximately 24 taro farmers. And taro is what poi is made from. The fish and poi. That's how we were brought up, fish and poi. When we were living in the valley, we lived a very, very simple life.
Heading south from the Waipio Valley, we stop briefly in Honoka. This humble old town is the center of the area's flourishing macadamia nut industry and a gateway to the Hamakua coast.
It seems your beauty will last forever and ever. Oh, Hamakua is in my mind forever.
One of the most popular stops along this route is Akaka Falls State Park, highlighted by the spectacular Akaka Falls, tumbling down 420 feet in a sheer drop. Driving south to Hilo, we got a quick taste of the liquid sunshine that so diligently nourishes the Hamakua coast. Hilo, which lies at the southern end of the coast, is really worth getting to know. As one of the oldest settled towns in the Hawaiian Islands, it's managed to carve out quite a unique personality for itself. And though it scares off some, Hilo's notoriously rampant rainfall only adds to its appeal. Places like the exquisite Nani Mau Gardens thrive in Hilo, and botanical specialist Bob Gibbons is well aware why.
Hilo is the rainiest city in the United States. We average about 160 inches of rain a year. The water, of course, helps everything grow real well. The temperature rarely rises above 90 degrees, so weather conditions are generally just about perfect for growing flowers and fruits and vegetables and that sort of thing.
Hilo is called the orchid capital of the world, and Nani Mau Gardens has a dazzling collection of the flowers, one of the largest in the state. But orchids didn't simply appear in Hilo overnight.
We have a lot of wild orchids that were distributed here around the early 1900s. Hilo was known for orchids, but there weren't very many orchids around growing wild, so someone decided to go up in an airplane and distribute millions of orchid seeds all over the island. So now we have about 4 different varieties that grow quite commonly wild.
Just up the road from Nani Mau Gardens, off Route 11, the Panaeva Rainforest Zoo offers an unusual glimpse at creatures who flourish in wet worlds. Most of the animals in the zoo are indigenous to rainforests. The unspoken but heavily implied resident motto here is, the wetter, the better. "45 minutes south of Hilo, we encountered our starkest geographical transition yet. The island of Hawaii is one of the youngest spots on Earth and is still growing. Kilauea Volcano's vigorous growth pangs can be eye-witnessed at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Although there are hundreds of active volcanoes in the world, few are nicknamed the drive-in volcano, as Supervisory Ranger John Erickson explains.
At any one time in the world, there are several volcanoes erupting. The degree of ease to get there is another matter. Just the one thing to remember about Kilauea and Mauna is that they are accessible, and that their eruptions are relatively peaceful and usually non-explosive. So you can get very close to lava flows on the surface, very close to lava flows as they enter the ocean, or at a safe distance when we have one of the Kilauea's famous high fountains, where lava can shoot up nearly 2,000 feet into the air.
Kilauea is the present home of Pele, the goddess of fire. A lot of people fear Madame Pele, but there are many, like native Hawaiian Pua Kanahele, who feel a great devotion to the goddess.
To native Hawaiians as well as people who are not native Hawaiians believe that Pele is destructive and that she's evil, and they parallel the concept of Pele with that of Satan and hell. And to me, it's hurtful, because what about it being Genesis, where creation begins? Because that's what's going on here. What's going on here is creation.
At the end of Chain of Craters Road, visitors can park their cars and walk a mile out to where the lava is pouring into the sea.
Going out to the lava flow, you probably put your life as close to the brink as you have ever done in your life.
We're off to our nation's final frontier, Alaska. Get ready, folks, because on this exciting voyage, we'll float amidst the towering fjords of the Kenai Peninsula, fly over the awesome Alaska Range, and roar up to the native villages of the interior. But let's not waste any more time talking about it. Let's hit the road. Our journey begins about 120 miles south of Anchorage in Seward, Alaska, gateway to Kenai Fjords National Park. As we headed out to Resurrection Bay on a day-long jaunt with Kenai Fjords Tours, we were completely unprepared for the primitive beauty of this 35,000-acre park.
The park is, is still new, and people are just now finding out about it.
Captain Jack Scobie began sharing the long-hidden secrets of the Kenai Fjords with passengers after it was declared a national park in the early 80s.
The only way you can get there is either by boat or airplane. And then the Harding Ice Field covers the majority of the park. The Harding Ice Field runs the whole top of all of the mountains here, and then as the glaciers come down the valleys into the ocean there.
With such a large area to explore, the ride through Kenai Fjords is always chock full of crowd-pleasing surprises. Back on shore, we were just in time to see contenders in the local halibut derby weighing in their impressive catches near the dock. Seward size may pale in comparison with, say, a halibut's, but it's as big as they come if you're talking possibilities. The drive north on the Seward Highway shamelessly boasts an abundance of scenic sights. And Moose Pass, a tiny little town along the highway, boasts its very own water wheel, compliments of longtime resident Ed Estes. Originally built in memory of his stepfather, thousands of folks have stopped to sharpen their knives on Ed's grindstone over the years.
You got to be a regular tourist attraction. If I had a nickel for every picture taken of it, I'd be a millionaire.
Ed's creed is, if you've got an axe to grind, do it here. Pretty sound advice. The next big stop on the Seward Highway happens to be the most popular spot in Alaska. Over 1,800 people visit Portage Glacier every day. Forest Service guide Kathy Allard told us why.
It's a really easily accessible glacier, and I mean the view is just beautiful. The icebergs in the lake. It's there are a lot of glaciers around, but a lot of them are hanging or they're in contact with the land, so you don't have the icebergs like we do out here.
About 10 miles north of Portage Glacier, visitors can ride the chairlift at the Alyeska Resort that enjoys sweeping views of Glacier Valley. The town of Girdwood lies at the foot of Alyeska, and the Crow Creek Mine lies at the end of a dirt road in Girdwood.
Hello. Hi. Welcome to Crow Creek. Did you want to do some panning?
Yeah.
Good.
Mine owner Cynthia Toohey is a transplanted New Yorker who came to the Alaskan frontier years ago in search of a husband. Now folks come to her in search of gold.
We offer, for $5, you can go and down the creek and you mine all day long if you want. We allow people to mine 2 days a week, only 2 days. Any 2 days out of 7, because I don't want a campground full of gold miners. I want a campground full of people from Chicago and New York and San Francisco that have never mined before.
In 1867, Alaska was purchased from Russia for the bargain basement price of $7.2 million. But over 100 years later, Russian influences can still be found in various aspects of the native culture, most notably religion. A half hour north of Anchorage, just off the Glen Highway, Eklutna Village offers visitors a chance to see just how Russian Orthodoxy has permeated native beliefs. Eklutna guide Thomas Moffat is often on hand to answer questions as well.
Here at Eklutna, the first Russian missionary arrived in 1843. And guess what he found when he came? He found the spirit houses. And he was pretty happy to see them because, for one thing, it saved him a great deal of time. He didn't need to explain to the native people about the soul or the spirit. They already believed in a life after death. So the only visible change that was made here in the cemetery was the addition of the Christian cross in front of the houses, the traditional Russian three-barred variety.
Today, it's estimated that over 30% of the native population of Alaska claim Orthodox Christianity as their faith. Back on the Glen Highway, we were encouraged to visit the muskox farm in Palmer. This you've got to see to believe.
The muskox are a prehistoric animal. They've been around since the first ice age. We are trying to domesticate the muskox and raise them for their soft underhair, which we call kiviut. Kiviute is 8 times warmer than sheep's wool by weight. Kiviute is very rare. This is the only farm in the world where we harvest the Kiviute off muskox.
After the Kiviute is harvested, Yupik Eskimo women knit the garments in their rural villages. The final product is then sold at the Muskox Cooperative in Anchorage, as well as here at the farm. 2 hours north of Palmer, the George Parks Highway led us to the lively little town of Talkeetna. Located just 60 miles from Mount McKinley, the town's economy pretty much revolves around this monumental mountain.
About 1,000 people try McKinley each year that come from all over the world.
Jim Ockenick runs K2 Aviation in Talkeetna and spends May and June ushering climbers up to McKinley's base camp.
For 2 short months each year, Talkeetna becomes an international city. They come from everywhere. And of course, the attraction is it's the highest mountain on the continent.
But things don't settle down after the climbers have gone. Flight seeing has become big business in Talkeetna, and with good reason.
Nobody has really seen Alaska until they get airborne. When you get airborne around McKinley, it's truly a magnificent area. The big glacier, the mountain and the extent of the mountains is truly spectacular. What we hear over and over is that from everybody that flies, and irregardless of what the weather might be like, that it's the highlight of their Alaska experience.
Two and a half hours north of Talkeetna, just off the George Parks Highway, lies one of our country's great national treasures, Denali National Park. Denali's enthusiastic naturalist, Bob Butterfield, spoke with us of this vast wilderness area.
Well, I think this is one of the greatest wildlife viewing parks in the United States. It was set aside in 1917 as a game refuge. The park is 6 million acres in size, and that's kind of, how do you comprehend 6 million acres? If you explored 1,000 acres a day, it would take you over 16 years to see all of this national park.
Where is it? 10 o'clock.
In order to maintain Denali as a wilderness preserve and minimize congestion, visitors have the option of seeing the park on one of the park's yellow school buses or on a private tour with a certified guide.
When you're riding a bus, whether it's a wildlife tour bus or a shuttle bus that goes into the park, it's just with 40 or more people looking out over the tundra, you can see a lot of wildlife. Just 1 or 2 people riding in a car just don't have the opportunity to see the wildlife.
Wildlife aside, the tour's most exciting moment is often when the awe-inspiring McKinley comes into view.
Mount McKinley was named by a prospector back in 1896. Prior to that, one of the other names that was known as was Denali. And Denali was a Koyukon Athabascan name, meaning the high one or the tall one.
Called Denali National Park since its expansion in 1980, most visitors find it to be a truly special preserve.
I think it's the wildlife, the chance to see grizzly bears roaming through the countryside. They're not zoo animals here. That they're wild, they're unpredictable. We have to take nature on its own terms.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal.
Of the many activities offered by the park's concessionaire, Alaska Cabin Night is among the most popular. Held in a beautiful log cabin near the McKinley Chalet, this rousing review was conceived by the chalet's general manager, Carson Flaherty.
We decided to start a dinner theater up here. It's a very fun wilderness banquet buffet. It's served family style. and it is topped off by a wilderness review on a time period piece, 1910 circa in Kantishna. And all the server performers are your actors, and it's a lot of fun.
The McKinley Chalet often serves as activity central for Denali's wide range of offerings. For example, since the hotel lies conveniently along the Nenana River, owl rafting adventures begin right out the back.
Owl rafting provides a canyon run, and it's an 11-mile trip. It takes about 2 hours, and you hit Class 3 to slight Class 4 rapids. It's a lot of fun. It's the only roller coaster in town, and on a day like today, it's a wonderful thing to do.
Let's face it, no matter what the weather holds, a visit to this enchanting national park on any day is a wonderful thing to do. Continuing our journey north on the George Parks Highway, we came to the town of Nenana, about an hour after leaving Denali. Nenana is an Athabascan Indian word meaning two rivers. Local wilderness guides Doug Bowers and his wife Kathy Leninger took us for a river ride that proved to be something of a cultural awakening for us.
Over there is a fish wheel. They're used for fishing rivers here in the interior because the rivers are silty and you can't see the fish. And it's very critical for people living in villages where there are very few opportunities for employment and your food supply depends on what you can catch.
Living in Nenana, which is about half white, half Athabascan, Kathy and her family have come to admire their native neighbors' subsistence lifestyle.
You become very familiar with another culture and with a way of life that is passing when your living comes from the land, when you use your own hands to get your food and shelter and heat. It's a very spiritual way of life, I think.
But we soon learned there are other ways of life that thrive in Nenana as well.
It's home to some of the most well-known dog mushers in the world.
Kathy took us to the boisterous home of her friend, champion dog musher Rick Mackey. This 1983 Iditarod race winner has based his vast canine empire in Nenana for a variety of reasons.
It's a very good place for sled dogs. There's an excellent trail system. The weather is what you need, which is cold weather. There's a lot of other dogs in the area, which makes it good as far as maintaining trail and just overall having other people around that are doing the same thing, so you don't, drive them crazy with 80 dogs barking,
Fairbanks, Alaska lies only 150 miles south of the Arctic Circle. And much as it may seem like a fairly urban place, you can't help but feel like you're close to the edge of the earth. We decided the best way to understand what makes this town tick would be by meeting the folks who call it home. Fortunately, we hooked up with Pat Walsh, the creative force behind Van Gogh Custom Tours. Van Gogh proved to be the ideal way to see the real Fairbanks.
Today we're going to be touring the area in and around Fairbanks. The interior and the Fairbanks area, I think, is home to a real wide variety of people, an A through Z type, home to many eccentrics. We're on the edge of the wilderness, very much a frontier town that's rough around the edges, and I think that's part of its charm.
The first stop on our custom design tour was outside of town at the North Pole Acres Farm. Here, Ed and Aggie Bostrom spend their days growing berries and vegetables while rising to the challenges of subarctic farming.
We have so little information on agriculture in Alaska that you simply have to try things. But we're still really in a pioneering stage. If you adapt to the conditions we have and don't try to bring up stuff from the lower 48 that really won't work in our latitude, then that's not really that big a problem.
After leaving Ed and Aggie's, Pat took us to meet a young woman who's carrying on her family's reputation in the world of sprint dog mushing.
Good morning. My name is Shannon Earhart. I am an Athabascan Indian from here in the interior of Alaska. My family originally comes from Nulato.
As a native Alaskan, Shannon was able to show us aspects of the sport that have been with her people for centuries.
My mother wanted to keep up a tradition of our sewing, so she learned how to make our traditional parkas, and there are fancy parkas. So you don't see these a lot except for big special occasions. You'll see a lot of this trim with geometrical designs or squares, and she wanted to use our Athabascan trademark, which is a flower. The inside is the wolverine, the outside is the wolf, and why they used those two first was because they had a natural oil that would collect frost instead of our faces, so we would become frostbitten.
As is often the case, Pat saved our most interesting stop for last. Sam Dementiff of River Journeys of Alaska ferried us to the camp of Athabascan elder Howard Luke. After leading us to an old cemetery in the grounds of his camp, Howard captivated us with tales of his native upbringing.
When I quit school, my mother told me that there'll be a lot of people around here. I told her that I can write my name and stuff. She said, you gotta know more than that, because there'll be people all over around here pretty quick, and you've got to know something, she says. So I had a choice. I either had to study, I learned from Cyrus Roebuck, and all those, and that's how I learned how to, and I taught myself. So I'll tell you, Cyrus Roebuck catalog really come in handy for a lot of things.
With the threat of assimilation wearing on native traditions, Howard is busy passing things on to his nephew. His greatest hope is for people to finally begin to respect one another.
I always say this, that if we work together, I think we can solve our problems, because we all got problems. Nobody is perfect.
Howard Luke's insights filled us with a fascination for native Alaskan culture, so after bidding a fond farewell to Van Gogh Tours, we headed over to Alaska Land, Alaska's only theme park, where the Northern Inua show recaptured our burning curiosity. The show is a spin-off of the World Eskimo Indian Olympics, held in Fairbanks every July, as executive producer Gina Kollick explains.
Because we have so many visitors to Alaska that don't get to be here for that 1 week in July when we have the games, we've developed this show which highlights some of the events and then some other games that are done just for fun that they'll get a chance to see that they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Most of the games, which have been developed over many centuries, serve as far more than simple recreational enjoyment.
It comes from having to live a subsistence lifestyle. For instance, the ear pull, which people always wonder why do they do the ear pull, comes from having to be able to endure the pain of frostbite. If you're out on the ice somewhere hunting and you get frostbite, which is something that happens to people every day, you'd have to be able to endure the pain of that and still keep moving to get back to where you could get help. So it trains you for that possibility.
I only wish we had more time to spend in this incredible place called Alaska, but I'm confident our little armchair adventure has enticed you to want to get out and experience the back roads of America firsthand. I'm Steve Fox. I'll see you on our next American Road Trip. Hi, I'm Steve Fox. Welcome to American Road Trips, the program where we explore the small towns and scenic back roads of America. And we'll be out in the country's great Northwest, big sky country. Montana is a place where you can be humbled by nature. Join us as we cross the Continental Divide, hear Indian folklore, and follow in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark through towns with names like Great Falls, Deer Lodge, Moose City, and Hungry Horse. Today, when we think of Montana, images of land and sky come to mind. The ancient wilderness and steep mountains offer sweeping views. There are elements of nature and wildlife everywhere. It's a place where eagles soar and buffalo still roam.
One of the things I think I find most attractive about the place is that it's relatively unchanged over time.
I know I've talked to a lot of people from the East Coast who say that they would like to chuck everything and move out to Montana and live in a log cabin and go fishing, but of course they can't. So it remains a kind of fantasy for them.
If you've ever dreamt of traveling to the Old West, you may want to start your trip in Missoula. It's situated in a valley surrounded by the Rattlesnake Wilderness area and the Bitterroot Mountains. For most of the 20th century, writers and artists have been attracted to this university town for its progressive atmosphere, outdoor life, and rich Western culture. Jim Welch, a Missoula writer, is also a descendant of Montana's Blackfeet Indians. His novels and poetry have gained him national notoriety.
I try to cover all aspects of Indian life in my writing. And in my poetry, I've tried to present lyrical snapshots, in a sense, of Indian people and of the landscape. There's a mystique about Montana, and I've noticed that more people are interested in reading about Montana.
Before leaving town, stop off at Freddy's Feed and Read for some food and fiction. Robin Ettingen works at Freddy's, and she'll encourage you to try a local author.
There's a large literary community in Missoula, and as a result, we have a lot of the published works of these people in our bookstore, and a lot of our sales are of these books, and we do promote them.
Leaving Missoula, we headed east on Route 200 into the Blackfeet River Valley. This area was originally prairie land, and driving through it still gives you an old homestead feeling.
Montana has been able to maintain some of its character longer than other western states. So you can have, again, a certain sense of a real, live, working community.
As an independent film producer, Onyx Smith is a long way from Hollywood, but she's managed to combine her work in the movies with her Montana lifestyle.
People are very much connected to the outdoors here, as well as to culture. So, and that's, again, a wonderful sort of atmosphere for artists to work in.
In her film, Heartland, she tells the story of a woman pioneer and her struggles with the hard realities of early frontier living.
Yeah. Whoa! Hello!
Hello.
Both the audience and critics loved it.
I'm Eleanor Randall.
I know who you are.
I was beginning to believe I was the only woman in this country.
It received a lot of attention and a lot of awards, I think, because for the first time, maybe ever, a really authentic story of Western experience was being told on the screen. And it focused on a woman and on a family and on work instead of the old cowboy, you know, Western myth.
Onyx suggests that a visitor should find local people to help broaden your experience of Montana.
I would recommend staying in some of the smaller towns and, you know, eating at the local steakhouses, and for sure going to the local bars, because in Montana, bars are sort of the community centers. Well, one thing about living out here is I think you get addicted to space, and that's one thing Montana has, maybe more than any other resource, is space. It can get lonely here, and you can miss the amenities of the city, but still, when you want to come home and live and work and play, this is the place to do it.
About an hour and a half from Missoula, we pulled into a town called Deer Lodge, just off Interstate 90. Cattle ranching is still one of the single most important occupations in the state, and we wanted to see the Grant Coors Ranch. Back in the 1800s, it was the biggest ranch in the West. Now the National Park Service owns it.
It seemed as though that was an important part of American history that was about to disappear from the American West, because many of the ranches, as you see this one, those of this type have fallen down or been replaced by more modern corporate ranches.
Bill Stalker still makes sure Grant Coors gets the same attention it did in the old days.
We repair things by hand. We use our blacksmith shop as we can to do repairs on the ranch.
The Park Service had the good sense to hire Pete Cartwright, an old-time cowpuncher. Definitely no urban cowboy. He spent a lifetime working in the saddle.
I had my own ranch. I run it. I run 500 cows and farmed a couple of thousand acres. And I did most of that with one man. It was kind of a funny ranch, you know. It was one of those that wasn't big enough for 3 men and too big for 2. And so I'd done the 2 men's work. But I enjoyed it.
Montana's weather is ever-changing. It can get mighty cold, and the winter of 1886 was especially brutal. The ranchers were hit hard, and their business was changed forever.
They lost most of their cattle, so that kind of changed the life of the cowboy. They had to start raising hay and preparing for winter if they were going to survive in the cow business. They had to irrigate and drive a team and mow hay and pitch hay and one thing and another. And it was a different life, you know, than sitting in a saddle all day.
While life on the range has changed over the past 100 years, the lonesome cowboy still finds the most comfort in his family.
If an old cowboy broke his leg, and he could just go to the ranch and live there as long as he was able to get around and get to the table. I got grandkids that just as good at cowboys as you ever come down the road. One's 22 and my granddaughter's 26. They just don't mess with that old rope, you know. They grew up at it. When they were 3 or 4 years old, I had them roping. And that's the most fun I ever had in my life, is making cowboys out of them.
After a long, hard day of rounding up cattle and tending to ranch chores, we headed east on Highway 12, across the Continental Divide at McDonald's Pass, and we're soon in the state capital of Helena. In 1864, the discovery of gold transformed this town. The buildings in Reeder's Alley were built for the mule skinners and miners who came into town for both business and pleasure. Outside Helena, we heard about a place on the Missouri River called the Gates of the Mountains, so we drove north on Interstate 15. It is an impressive place. This 5.5-mile stretch of the upper Missouri River was named by Lewis and Clark in the early 1800s. Much of the canyon has remained unchanged over time. Local resident Tim Crawford has been coming to this spot for 12 years. He now manages a scenic boat tour business.
You don't have to wait in lines. Solitude is easy to come by here.
Around almost every turn, it appears that the river has stopped, but then as the gates open back up, the river continues. The solitude reflects in the serenity of the canyon. Sometimes it can be hard to tell where the land begins and the water ends. Each fall and winter, bald eagles migrate. You just may be lucky enough to spot one of these majestic birds of prey. We drove on toward Great Falls. Tim suggested a wonderful little frontage road that crisscrosses the Missouri River. Some say the best fishing spots in America can be found here. Traveling north into Montana's Great Plains, the land begins to open up. On this eastern side of the Continental Divide, the landscape seems to spread out over endless miles. These settings are reminiscent of scenes painted by the great cowboy artist Charlie Russell. Tom Bradshaw, the director of the Charlie Russell Museum in Great Falls, paints a picture of the father of Western art.
Charlie portrays the people of the West so very well. He makes you feel comfortable with these people and the kind of lifestyle they led.
Charlie recognized that the ways of the Old West were vanishing, and he made it his mission to accurately record those days. His unique relationship with the Plains Indians lends invaluable insight to their lifestyle.
Charlie was probably one of the best spokesmen for the Indian. His paintings showed Indian life as it had been early in the 19th century, as well as what it was like on the reservations. I think a mutual friendship did develop between Charlie and the Blackfeet. He was willing to let the Indians be Indian, and as a result became accepted and developed some friendships that lasted until he died.
Leaving Great Falls, we drove north on Highway 89. Here the plains meet the eastern front of the Rocky Mountains, some of the steepest and undoubtedly the most forbidding terrain in the West. These mountains provide a dramatic backdrop for a town called Browning, now the homeland of the Blackfeet Indian Nation. Early historians referred to these people as the Raiders of the Northwest Plains. In talking with Curly Bear Wagner, a Blackfeet storyteller, we realized that it was their awareness of the natural order of things that helped develop their prowess in warfare. They learned from the animals that were considered so sacred to them: the bear, eagle, bobcat, and wolf.
The Indians would study his warrior techniques, and also his hunting techniques. When they were on the prairies and they were hunting, they would lay down and they'd wave their arrows. And when the antelope was close enough, he'd jump up and shoot him with his arrow.
Over centuries, Indians considered the bison their staff of life, and it held their proud culture together.
We're a nomadic people. We followed the buffalo wherever they roamed. In those days, they claimed there was 16 to 17 million buffalo in the United States and Canada. And so we had a big supermarket to pick from.
As a child, Curly Bear's uncle once asked him, "Who are you?" When Curly Bear responded with the obvious answer, his uncle corrected him.
He said, "I'll tell you who you are, son." He said, "You see those mountains?" And he said, "You see those trees? You see that grass? You see those rocks? You see this water?" He said, "That's who you are." He said, "You are all those things." He said, "Take care of those things."
For centuries, the Rockies have been referred to as the backbone of the world. They hold a very special meaning to the Blackfeet people.
These mountains are very sacred to us. When we walk into them, it's like walking into a cathedral. You can feel the spiritual power into the mountains. So we take care of these things because they were a gift to us.
The white man's efforts to overcome the unyielding Indian and his sacred land proved endless. It was only after repeated epidemics and the relentless massacre of the buffalo did the Indians succumb.
We always thought very highly of our families and of our children and of our elders. And for them to be clothed and fed, we had to sign our land away for broken promises. I think when people come to Montana or into Blackfeet country, I want them to remember the beauty of the mountains.
We left the reservation with an enlightened respect for nature and the Blackfeet ways. As we were just 20 miles south of St. Mary, we realized that Curly Bear had given us the perfect invitation to the spectacular Glacier National Park.
What you're seeing are the results of those ice ages moving through here, carving and sculpting the peaks and creating the mountain lakes.
Joe Decker, one of Glacier's naturalists, helps explain some of the fundamental geography of the park.
It gets its name not because we have 50 or 60 small glaciers still here in the park, but really because of those ice age glaciers that moved through this area 3 million to about 10,000 years ago. Glacier National Park is a wild park, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about it. In other words, you're part of nature here.
Much of Glacier's beauty can be seen right from the road. In fact, the Going to the Sun Highway is the only one that crosses the park. Glacier Park can be thought of as a living laboratory. The area provides much-needed information about the wilderness lands, and it is a perfect opportunity for researchers to study endangered species.
The animal populations in the park are holding their own. In 1986, we had a litter of wolf pups born. First time in over 50 years that there were wolves born in the lower 48 states, and that was a pretty exciting event.
We took a detour to the northwest side of Glacier Park, literally a stone's throw from the Canadian border. As we made our approach to Moose City along the Flathead River, the sheer magnitude of this high country was laid out before us. There is a sensitive relationship between people and the wild animals in this area. Diane Boyd is part of the University of Montana's Wolf Ecology Research Project. She's been documenting the recent migration of wolves from Canada to the northern part of Glacier Park.
It's been really interesting watching the population grow from the initial wolf recolonization to about 30 individuals now. When I think of the wolf, I think of it as being kind of an index of the wildness of the country. It definitely reflects the quality of the environment. You don't find wolves in settled areas. You don't find wolves in industrialized areas. The wolf creates more emotion than any other animal, even more than the grizzly bears, which I find interesting. Even now, I mean, I've heard wolves howl hundreds of times. You just stop in your tracks and you listen. It just sets off something really primitive inside. For me, I don't find it fearful. I find it exciting.
Diane has lived here for 7 years. She has no TV, no VCR, and only a mobile telephone. We asked her, doesn't it get a little lonely out here?
It was quite a change coming from Minneapolis to Moose City. Population, too, if you count the dogs. I flew in and I thought, my gosh, I'm at the end of the world here. I fell in love with the place, I eventually bought some land. I'm building a cabin, and I wouldn't live anywhere else now.
It isn't a surprise that most wild animals are extremely shy, so you'll have to learn how to track them carefully.
When looking for wildlife, not only do you want to use your sense of sight, but you also want to use your ears.
Randy Gaynor, a wilderness guide, teaches visitors how to pick up unusual signals from the local wildlife.
An example would be the marmot, which is a small alpine groundhog type of animal that whistles a lot whenever there's danger around.
Family life seems to be the same everywhere. Even for the mountain goats, it's hard to get the children to move out of the house.
Some of the big billies and the nannies that have kids will kind of ward off the younger ones that are trying to stay around the mother longer than she wants them to. She kind of has to kick them out of the family and send them out on their own. You get up close to the goats, I think their faces are probably one of the most interesting of any of the animals in the park. It looks like a wise old man with a beard.
With the help of Randy's expertise, your awareness to nature will become finely tuned. However, you can't help but be reminded of the element of danger in the wilderness.
At the head of every trail, there's a warning for grizzly bears. And the bear will actually sense the person a lot sooner than the person senses a bear. So they've kind of learned through the years that if they mess with people, they end up in trouble.
From the air, we can appreciate the scale of the landscape, from the jagged Rocky Mountains to the farmland regions of Kalispell, Hungry Horse, and Flathead Lake. Strand Aviation took us for a flight to the Chinese Wall. This amazing formation, averaging 1,000 feet high, goes on for over 22 miles and is tucked away deep in the Bob Marshall Wilderness area. After a bird's-eye view of the area, we decided to hit the road again and head south. On Highway 35, along the eastern shore of Flathead Lake, we approached the Flathead Indian Reservation. Much of this fertile land belongs to the Salish and the Kootenai Indians. 1.25 million acres extends from the southern half of the lake, almost clear down to Missoula. Along 212 in Moise is the National Bison Range. Michael Pablo, the chairman of the Confederated Salish Kootenai Tribe, explains how it all got started.
Around the turn of the century, my great-great-grandfather, Michel Pablo, and a friend of his, Charlie Ellard, bought a few buffalo calves from a Flathead Indian by the name of Samuel Walking Coyote. And from that, they began a herd, which you see here now. I believe the bison are maybe what America is about. They're tough and rugged, and they're here to stay as long as we give them a chance.
John Malcolm has worked on the range for 9 years. He explains why visitors are thrilled when they come to the home where the buffalo roam.
There is no hunting in here, so the animals they're not harassed by people like they are in other parts of the country. And as a consequence, most of the time the visitors do get a real good opportunity to see some of these different species of critters, oftentimes fairly close up.
Montana is overwhelming when you stop and think about it. Even driving, you can enjoy watching and listening for wildlife. The people who live here are strong and independent. Their land is too powerful to be tamed, and they like it that way. They help give you an appreciation of one of America's last great frontiers. We'll be driving straight into the heart of the Rockies. With Salt Lake City as our starting point, we'll head up to Idaho's Sawtooth National Recreation Area, an ever-growing mecca for outdoor enthusiasts. Then we'll make our way across the state into western Wyoming, home to world-class sightseeing spots like Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks. So buckle up and get ready for a true road trip adventure. We hit the road in Salt Lake City, Utah, taking Interstate 15 north to the Route 13 exit at Brigham City. From there, we simply followed the signs to our first stop, and our trip was underway. Golden Spike National Historic Site pays homage to a time when our nation's railroads seemed invincible. But Golden Spike engineer Bob Dowdy put history in its proper perspective for us.
Well, of course, the Central Pacific was building towards the east from California. The Union Pacific was building towards the west from Omaha. And they were really in a competition for money, not for property, so to speak. And the Central Pacific had built to Monument Point, and the Union Pacific had built to Corinth. They were getting government subsidies for every mile of grade that they made. Well, about in April of 1869, the United States government caught wind of what was happening. And they had gone past each other for 250 miles. You see, they had no intention of stopping until they were told to stop. So the government sent surveyors out, and they surveyed the line. And they divided up the distance, which brought the railroads right here.
And the Central Pacific and Union Pacific have been stubbornly, albeit ceremoniously, deadlocked at Golden Spike ever since. From Golden Spike, Route 83 runs into Interstate 84 west, and that'll take you into the famous Potato State. Twin Falls, Idaho, 150 miles northwest of Golden Spike, made headlines in 1974 when daredevil Evel Knievel came to town. This is where Evel attempted to cross the Snake River Canyon in his bizarre sky cycle. If you look close enough, you can still see the 180-foot launch ramp he had built for the ill-fated jump. An hour and a half north of Twin Falls, Route 75 passes through the wonderful little town of Ketchum, Idaho. Ketchum is best known as one of Ernest Hemingway's habitual haunts. The great writer spent various portions of his time here after being lured to nearby Sun Valley in 1939 to help promote the ski resort. Tilly Arnold and her late husband Lloyd were good friends of Hemingway's in Idaho. Lloyd Arnold wrote High in the Wild with Hemingway, recounting their numerous hunting excursions, and Tilly is in the process of writing about her own fond memories of the man they call Papa.
He worked in his bedroom, and he had that view always when he was writing up here. He loved the country. He liked the people. He wasn't bothered here when he was writing. No one bothered him. And I just liked him as a man, as a person. He was a wonderful person, good, kind, gentle. I found him that way, anyway.
Ketchum and Sun Valley, Idaho sit near the southern entrance of the Sawtooth National Recreation Area, one of nature's most tantalizing amusement parks. Many a good time lurks within the nooks and crannies of the Sawtooth Mountain Range. Some of the most popular activities revolve around Sawtooth's sparkling lakes and rivers. For instance, at the northern end of Sawtooth, in Stanley, Idaho, Bob Seavey of Seavey Guide Service revels in the endless possibilities for fly fishing on the Salmon River.
And what I want you to do is just let this wet line we're fishing with swing around the current there and behind that rock, and we'll see if we can pull some fish out. We have quite a long season here since the river is open 12 months of the year. And I usually start to fish here in February, and I end fishing in October. The Salmon River is primarily a novice fly fishing stream since it's accessed by the highway, and the waters are very easy to fish, and to wade through it, it's a prime opportunity for a novice.
Bob grew up in these parts while his father worked for the Forest Service, so he truly understands the power of the Sawtooths.
These mountains have a very strong attachment for me because the fourth highest peak in the Sawtooths is named after my father, Seavey Peak, and I've had an association here since I was 14 years old. When I talk to a person on the phone, I describe it as one of the best recreational opportunities they'd ever have in their lifetime, a trip of a lifetime, and it truly is.
Steve Lentz of the Middle Fork River Company enjoys fishing the salmon for a good rapid.
Well, the Salmon River has more miles contained in one state than any other river in the United States. And that's partly what makes the salmon so popular and so special amongst floaters. The salmon is also a wild river drainage. All the forks of the salmon are fed by snowpacks rather than hydroelectric dam releases. It's just a spectacular drainage to enter into because the history and the whitewater, the wilderness, it just makes for a really complete vacation.
One thing you're bound to notice up here, aside from the unbelievable scenery, is the friendliness and enthusiasm of the locals. self-proclaimed Idaho fun hog, Barbecue Cure, credits the atmosphere.
I've been to a lot of places, love to travel. It's part of being a fun hog. You've got to kind of dabble and get into everything. And I always come back here and people ask, why do you come back to Idaho? They go, is it because it's home? And I go, no, it's not home, it's heaven.
Bill Sullivan, a real-live cowboy poet, took us up to Sullivan's Creek to his family's old homestead, and words of Western wisdom just flowed from his mouth.
There are many different footprints, but they all make up a trail. Some folks don't know how to read them, but a cowboy seldom fails. Sometimes they make him sorry, and sometimes they make him sad, but they're telling on a story of what has happened, good or bad. Tracks help him find his partner. Tracks help him find his foe. If he's in a land that's new to him, tracks tell him where to go. He don't have to ask no questions. All he does is take a look. Because that old cowboy reads the rangeland, just like a schoolmarm reads your book.
Traveling out of the Sawtooth area, we daringly opted for a shortcut to get us to our next destination. Just off Route 75, outside of Clayton, the 20-mile Spar Canyon dirt road provides a thrilling mobile experience. With no warning at all, we found ourselves in the midst of a magnificent lunar-like landscape far different than the Sawtooths. The Spar Canyon Road ran into Route 93 South, and a truly worthwhile shortcut had ended. Now it was time for 3 hours of hardcore pedal pushing. 93 South runs into 26 South in Arco, Idaho, and 26 takes you to the potato capital of the world, Blackfoot. Blackfoot's World Potato Exposition provides a visual biography of the legendary Idaho spud. Visitors can learn just about everything they ever wanted to know about potatoes. Executive Director Maureen Hill was delighted to tell us about some of her favorite exhibits.
One of our funnest displays is a display of cosmetics made from the potato product. Hand lotions, bubble bath. Most people would have no idea that they could buy a product that had potatoes in that fashion. It's a wonderful product. Have you ever had potato ice cream? You bet. That's a real popular item around here, and it's a ice cream that is actually made with potatoes, and it tastes delicious. It tastes sort of like a yogurt.
Maureen didn't hesitate when asked why Idaho potatoes taste so delicious.
They are so good here because of the weather and the volcanic ash soil. We have very cool evenings and we have very warm days, and so it makes the perfect growing condition for the Idaho potato.
There's ample evidence of those superb conditions driving north out of Blackfoot on Interstate 15. Miles of potato fields stretch alongside the road, and mega-sized spud cellars ensure proper insulation for the delicate little vegetable. You can even witness remnants of volcanic activity that today helps provide nutritious soil for the Idaho potato. At Idaho Falls, we hopped on Route 20 East. A few hours later, we were at the western entrance of our nation's oldest and largest national park, Yellowstone. Yellowstone is enormous, almost the size of Connecticut. Fortunately, the Park Service has built a convenient loop road allowing visitors easy access to many of the more unique sites in the park. Park Ranger John Lonsberry spoke with us about Yellowstone's enduring popularity.
Yellowstone was formed in 1872, the world's first national park, and the reasons it was set aside as a national park are the reasons people come here today to see it. The thermal features, one of the most concentrated areas of thermal features in the world, and then the scenery, things like the canyon, Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone Falls, and the wildlife like the bison behind us. The wildlife show in Yellowstone is one of the best in the world. I don't think people can miss being impressed with the huge wildlife populations, and it's real unique to be able to see wildlife that's not hunted, that's not afraid of visitors, so you can certainly see lots of wildlife here.
Chances are you'll see some of Yellowstone's sizzling thermal features as well. The magmatic heat that powered the area's violent volcanic eruptions millions of years ago still powers the numerous geysers and hot springs in the park.
The thermal features in Yellowstone are unique because of the numbers and the diversity and the types that we have. The geysers are probably one of our most famous features. The most famous geyser we have is Old Faithful. For over 100 years has been our big crowd pleaser.
In 1988, uncontrollable fires raged through Yellowstone as a result of drought, high temperatures, and wind. Almost 1 million acres of the park were affected, but park naturalist Roger Anderson assured us it was simply nature taking its course.
You have to keep in mind that the Yellowstone prior to 1988 was Yellowstone that was shaped by fires. And it was fires here a century or more ago that molded and shaped this landscape that people came to realize and feel was Yellowstone Park. And it wasn't only until 1988 in our national psyche that we actually started to incorporate fire into the picture and into the scene. And it looks different, and Yellowstone will look different for the next century. But it's become an outdoor laboratory for all of our children and for their children to come and to visit and to see this place go through the changes that led up to 1988. So keep in mind that though it looks different, we're setting the stage for a new drama to be unfolded.
Just south of Yellowstone, the John D. Rockefeller Jr. National Memorial Parkway leads travelers into Grand Teton National Park, one of the most scenic spots in the world. Mountain lakes and a spectacular scenic backdrop have created an outdoor nirvana with something for everyone. The park's concessionaire, Grand Teton Lodge Company, offers some terrific activities for maximum Teton enjoyment. Float trips down the Snake River are extremely popular and easy since a guide does all the rough stuff. For something a little more exerting, there's a guided breakfast ride into the wilderness that can satisfy both the eyes and the stomach. For the eyes, there's exquisite scenery, and for the stomach, there's a delicious cowboy-style breakfast.
Here's your lady.
Wranglers like Louisiana-born Frenchie take great pride in their ride.
Breakfast ride is something special. The reason why for us it's special because it's a thing that we do that it's been done for years and years. And what we try to do is to show the people how the pioneer used to do it. Had to come down, chop some wood, and make the fire and everything, and then cook. And most of the recipe that we're using use a recipe that like in the old ways.
Having satisfied all you land lovers, lake lovers will be happy to hear about the steak-fried dinner cruise to Elk Island. "45 minutes south of the park, Jackson, Wyoming, is proof that old western towns never die. They're just transformed into popular tourist stops. RT5 Covered Wagon Cookout and Wild West Show is among the most entertaining Old West shows offered around town. The excitement really escalates when some uninvited guests show up. RT5 founder Bill Thomas has specific intentions in mind for his guests.
Well, we're trying to give them a kind of a pioneer experience, a little of the Old West. The Old West is gone, but what we're trying to do is give them something that was in the Old West and when it was here. This kind of way of doing that.
And that was the trip's piece de resistance.
Hey, we're off on a passage to the Pacific Northwest, Washington State. We'll sail the Puget Sound up to the picturesque San Juan Islands. Then back on the mainland, we'll drive through the Olympic Peninsula, down along Washington's rugged coastline. No road trip in this region would be complete without a visit to the Cascade Mountain Range. These mountains are part of a volcanic chain called the Rim of Fire. And recently, one of these sleeping beauties awakened with a bang. No matter where you drive in the western part of Washington, you'll notice the Pacific Coast, the Puget Sound, and the incredible mountain ranges. For hundreds of years, the sea has played an integral role for the people of this region. They have depended on the great outdoors as a lifestyle and a livelihood. We were attracted to the international port city of Seattle as our starting point, just as the early settlers chose it as their gateway to the great Klondike Gold Rush. Seattleites are proud of their city. In fact, it was selected in 1986 by Rand McNally's as the best city to visit and has long been considered one of America's most livable cities. One place you won't want to miss is the Farmers Market on Pike Street. It's open 365 days a year and offers an array of fresh regional foods, including some of the best seafood available anywhere.
There's a famous Puget Sound shrimp, the most delicious in the world. They're delicious, ma'am. How many you want? One more. Yeah. One more. One more. One more. You tell me, you got enough?
Your taste buds will surely be saturated, but if not, the purveyors can help you out.
We pack fish to go. We pack fish to go. It's pure food fish, folks. Step right in. Everybody bite today.
After the big city hustle-bustle, we drove north on Interstate 5, where we caught a Washington State ferry over to Whidbey Island. This island is 45 miles long, and you're never more than 5 miles from water. Highway 20 runs the length of Whidbey and took us through the neat old town of Coopville. Established in 1852, it's one of the oldest towns in Washington.
One of the reasons why it was so popular in the early days is because of the farmland, and it was settled as a farming community.
Just 10 miles north of Coopville is Penn Cove. Here we stopped off at the Captain Whidbey Inn, where we were lucky to meet John Stone, or actually Captain John Stone, a third-generation innkeeper and owner of the Captain Whidbey Inn.
You can travel through western Washington, sort of inn-hopping. It's an area for renewal of spirit, and having an inn right on the water, it seemed like a perfect mix to do sailing charters as well as the inn.
Even though Captain John lives in a small rural area, his love for the sea has taken him way beyond Penn Cove and Whidbey Island.
I've had a transatlantic sail. Recently I sailed with Soviet sailors and American sailors on the first joint American-Soviet environmental research venture. And we sailed from New York to Leningrad in the Soviet Union. It's a wonderful lifestyle to be an innkeeper. I wouldn't do anything else, except maybe be a sailing captain, but I do that too.
Whidbey is known not only for its agriculture, but also its aquaculture. Some of the tastiest shellfish come from this little community.
We're fortunate in living right on Penn Cove, where we have the Penn Cove mussel, which is the world's most delicious mussel.
Captain John raved about the regional delicacies and wanted to introduce us to Ian Jeffords, a mussel farmer with whom he shares the local waters.
But it's not that we do anything really in particular to make them taste good, in as much as they're grown in a really nice area. Penn Cove is as pristine as water gets, really, in the Northwest. We get a lot of water coming into Penn Cove. We have a lot of nutrients coming in here from the river system, and it really creates a super environment for shellfish.
Ian points out that quality of seafood depends on its origin.
People like to know that it's farm-raised. They like to know that it's clean. They like to know that it's certified. They like to know that it's fresh. Shellfish farmers are the first to be affected by any change in water quality, and they've been farming shellfish, particularly oysters, in Washington State since 1800s, and they've long been pushing for, you know, the great water quality and trying to make sure that it stays that good.
The San Juans are an archipelago of about 172 islands. It's comforting to know that only 2 hours from Seattle you can be in such a peaceful, relaxed area. The only way to get to the San Juans is by the state ferry system. The ferries are great because you can drive right on, so you're free to cruise around the islands at your own leisure. We decided to check out the 3 largest islands, San Juan, Orcas Island, and Lopez, where we started our journey. It's hard to miss Lopez on the approach. It's the biggest island in the archipelago and the most rural. The sprawling pasture land makes it popular with bicyclists. On the western side of Lopez is the small community of Richardson Bay. should you run out of any supplies or need anything, there's a good chance you'll be able to find it at the Richardson General Store.
That's one of the fun parts of buying for the store, is you can buy anything.
Sue Shaw and her husband Ed have owned the store for 12 years and have met almost everybody. We asked Sue about some of the local characters.
Oh, there are some very, very interesting people that live on the island.
We soon found out what Sue meant. You haven't met a real islander until you've met Uncle Phil Haston. Everybody knows him. In a way, he's sort of become a landmark around Lopez.
Man, the first place they head for when they get off that ferry is right down and check in with Uncle Phil. Where's the deer at, or other stories that's going on, yeah.
Born and raised on the islands, Phil has certainly had a long time to collect odds and ends. He's got quite an assortment on his farm.
My dad, he gave that truck to my wife, and a lot of people wanted to buy it as an antique, and Ma won't sell it. Hey, okay, yeah. The floorboards rotted out in it. And so this tree started to grow. Hell, it's been there since, 15, 20 years or something. To the family heirloom. Yeah, really want to go. Well, I'll go over here and then I'll haul it to cows and throw them a bale of hay.
Despite Phil's golden years, he's got a young man's spirit. We weren't quite sure where he gets all his energy from, but island living probably has something to do with it.
And you always run into conflicts, so you got to compromise and get them straightened out. But if you can have a happy disposition, you can live a long time. Now, maybe I don't know.
Some people can say they've got it all, but in Phil's case, he's probably done it all. He always has a story to tell.
You notice my long nose? Never got it broke because I was pretty good at boxing because I was a good dodger. That ain't one of them Los Angeles Dodgers either that come from Brooklyn.
Farming is nothing new to the Haston family. There have been 3 generations on Lopez Island.
There's damn few places that's left that's original, just like it was years ago. Come on, little baby, come on! Hurry up! As far as I'm concerned, this is God's country.
We said our goodbyes to Uncle Phil and Lopez and hopped on another ferry to San Juan Island. During the summer months, the islands are quite populated, and a favorite pastime for both visitors and locals is whale watching, specifically orcas, or killer whales.
If you think about the inland waters of British Columbia and Puget Sound, it's kind of like a giant aquarium.
Richard Osborne has been studying whales for 14 years. He's also been the curator of the Whale Museum on San Juan. He explains why these calm waters make it ideal to observe the orcas.
Here we have literally hundreds of miles of coastline, where the whales can be seen from shore and from boats fairly easily. Every time we take a photograph of a group of whales, we also get sort of a family portrait to look at the social organization of the whales.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime sight to see orca whales up close, but some people think that so much attention may have an adverse effect on these mammals. As the whale's environment changes, so does Richard's focus.
The whales are becoming much more popular with the general public, so that during the peak of the summer season, we can have up to 20 boats following the whales at a time. And so we're trying to see what effects this much boat traffic is possibly having on the whales. We're doing a lot of measurements of the underwater noise.
In 1983, the Limekiln Whale Watching Park was designated on the western side of the San Juan Island.
One of the things that we've tried to do to help improve that situation is to encourage the development of parks like this one. And by watching the whales from a place like this, you're actually having no impact on them whatsoever.
While some sea life is left wild and untouched, others are not as lucky.
Oysters are becoming the in thing to eat, and we're benefiting from that.
Just 10 miles down the road from Limekiln Park is Westcott Bay Oysters. Frank Rowe has worked the lines at Westcott Bay Oysters and reports that business is booming.
Out of these 2 bins here, we've sold about $30,000 worth of oysters in the past year.
Oyster farming is a rugged life, but that doesn't seem to bother these folks.
We try to have fun. It's a basic agricultural type job, and you make your own fun in it. Of course, it's a beautiful place to work.
We stayed at the 100-year-old Roach Harbor Resort, which was a favorite of Teddy Roosevelt's, and with all its charm, it turned out to be one of ours, too. After a good night of rest, we voyaged over to Orcas Island. Orcas has been regarded as the most beautiful in the island chain. There's a wide selection of quaint bed and breakfasts, but we went for the luxurious turn-of-the-century Rosario Resort. Just outside the driveway is Moran State Park. This 5,000-acre park is great for hiking, but the real highlight is from the top of the 2,409-foot Mount Constitution. On the highest peak, you can see all of the San Juans, the pearls of the Pacific Northwest. From Orcas Island, we backtracked through Whidbey Island and made our final ferry connection over to the Olympic Peninsula. Chief Mate Gary Hunt gave us a bird's-eye view from the bridge. Port Townsend was a major port of entry in the late 1800s. When the Pacific Railroad opted for a Seattle junction, much of the shipbuilding business left this area, but the tradition of wooden boat building is here to stay.
This is probably the highest concentration of wooden boat building in any one city in the United States.
The Northwest Wooden Boat Building School was created to preserve a dying craft. Sean Lapetito, the school's director, gave us a brief history.
The founder of the school was trained here at the Bremerton Navy Yard when wooden ships were still being built by the Navy. So he had a lot of formal experience in large boat construction, trained people from all over the world. Had people here from New Zealand, Saudi Arabia, Germany, England, Sweden.
Often these students are attracted by the technical know-how that they teach at the school.
And there's no greater feeling than wanting to create a certain specific shape for an area in the boat and going to a bench and fabricating that piece, coming to the boat and having it fit right in. The boat is not going to go into a stagnant environment. It's going to go into the sea, which can go anywhere from being totally calm to nasty beyond belief.
Peter, a student at the school, learned this lesson better than anybody. He got his experience firsthand.
It's really abusive out there because the waves are really choppy and big, and the wind was on our nose the whole time, and it just really gave me an appreciation for what the boats that we build have to go through.
Sean points out that students put incredible amounts of time and energy into building a wooden boat, but for them, the rewards are great.
Their boat is alive to them and has a certain character. People that come here have a dream, and most of those dreams for most people is to build a boat and go to sea. Wooden boat building is the ultimate in craftsmanship.
We headed west on Highway 101. This famous stretch of coastline circles the peninsula, which is also where one can find Olympic National Park and an incredible 1 million acres of breathtaking wilderness. Most of these deep forests in this area are hundreds and hundreds of years old. Our curiosity took us literally to the edge of the Pacific Rim. At the furthest western point in Washington, we discovered a village called Nia Bay. It is the home of the Makah Indian Nation, who have been on this land for 2,500 years.
We were primarily whale hunters and seal hunters and fishermen living in whaling canoes and sealing canoes.
We met Hamilton Green. Among his long list of credentials, he's been a minister, fisherman, historian, truck driver, movie actor, singer, and dancer. Hamilton is also the chief of the Wyatch village.
Indians were real skilled in their fishing, and they knew exactly where to fish and when to fish. They knew just where to be at the right place at the right time.
In 1970, an elaborate archaeological dig was conducted near Nia Bay. Almost 500 years earlier, an entire Makah village had been buried by a mudflow. Many important artifacts like tools and instruments have since been recovered.
Each person had had an instrument of some kind for fishing or whaling or sealing, fishing like that. They would have their design.
The old-growth forests, which are such a familiar sight in this part of the state, are a major resource for Washington's timber industry. For the Native Americans, they are sacred.
The cedar tree is something that we treasured and valued because we used everything from that tree. Well, I think the way we're, I call it abusing nature, is cutting our trees down. But our demand for the trees is so great. Now we need so much, and I don't think there's any end to it.
The drive south from Nia Bay along Route 101 is surprising. The coast changes dramatically from deep, lush forest to spacious sand beaches. Ocean Shores is a great place to stretch those driving legs a bit. If you want to keep going, you can continue to drive all along the 23 miles of beach. from the coast road, we took a left and jumped onto Interstate 5 South for about 25 miles, which brought us to Route 12. We turned off at a town called Randall and began our approach to Mount St. Helens Volcanic Monument. It's only when you reach the summit of Windy Ridge that the impact hits. May 18th, 1980. It was the day the earth shook and the skies darkened. Mount St. Helens, a dormant volcano for 123 years, unleashed her fury.
Mount St. Helens really reminds you how alive the earth is.
Todd Cullens, a ranger at the National Monument, explains the eruption's incredible impact.
The ash column went up to an elevation of about 70,000 feet. If you fly in a commercial jetliner, they fly at about 35,000 feet. And that ash column circled the world in about 2 weeks.
The scientific community had realized the value of this natural phenomenon, and in 1982, Mount St. Helens became a national monument. This popular tourist attraction also serves as a continued source of information for specialists.
Biologists thought it would take centuries for plant life to return to the monument. And they were quickly proven wrong because, as we saw as we walked down the trail, things survived everywhere.
The U.S. Forest Service went to a great deal of effort in constructing the walking trails within the monument. The purpose is to give visitors a true feeling of the destruction.
We wanted to keep a lot of the little trees and the big trees like this kind of hanging over the trail to kind of help add to the experience of coming to the mountain.
Visitors to the monument are humbled by nature's power.
This is one of those places, you see the pictures, you read about it, but it doesn't mean anything until you get out here and walk next to these blown down trees and these shattered stumps. Because Mount St. Helens is a place you really have to experience.
Retracing our steps back through Randall, we headed north on Highway 706. The 14,000-foot Mount Rainier can be seen from almost anywhere in the western part of the state. We took Highway 410 north towards a town called Snoqualmie. If you're looking for a great room with a view, try the Salish Lodge. It sits atop the falls, and it really gives you the feeling of being in the great northern Pacific. But before you leave town, make a pit stop at the Mar Tea Cafe. It's the place to stop for a darn good cup of coffee and a great piece of cherry pie. 15 minutes from Snoqualmie is Fall City. We remembered hearing about a great little restaurant called the Herb Farm.
We're a multi-sensual experience.
Well, that demands a further investigation. Karen and Ron Zimmerman own and operate this family business. Ron's mother started it by selling her garden herbs by the roadside. Since then, things have grown by leaps and bounds.
We have a nursery where we grow over 600 herb plants. We give you recipes for the different dishes we serve.
As the executive chef, Ron has set some principles for the restaurant, which might explain its huge success.
We cook according to the different seasons, from desserts, appetizers, sorbets. We feature herbs in every one of those dishes. The items on our salads are almost always from our kitchen garden itself, picked the same day that morning. Most herbs which have edible leaves also have edible flowers. They're all really tasty and very colorful.
At the Herb Farm, all the dishes have a certain element of surprise.
Sometimes people are a little cautious about whether or not they want to eat those colorful little petals on their plate, but we don't let them get away with that. By the end of the meal, they're just begging for more flowers.
If you find yourself in the area and in the mood for a tantalizing, healthy meal, check it out. It's only about 30 minutes from Seattle, but be advised you'll need reservations. The Herb Farm is pushing those petals and has quite a following.
Everywhere you can possibly go in Washington, you get that comfortable, small town feeling. The people are friendly and they're outgoing. They know how to live. And you certainly can't argue about the scenery. It's some of America's most magnificent. No wonder it's been voted the most livable area in the United States. But you don't have to live there to enjoy it. Just jump in your car and hit the road. Hi, I'm Steve Fox, and welcome to American Road Trips, the program that explores the back roads and scenic byways of America. Today we'll meet the many faces of Virginia, a state endowed with a rich, memorable history. From the staunch traditions of her hunt clubs to the hardy pleasures of her mountain people, we'll discover how Old Dominion has evolved into a good times kind of state, navigating a leisurely southwestern path down those dueling asphalt beauties, Skyline Drive and the Blue Ridge Parkway. We'll relish the tranquility of Shenandoah National Park, the charm of Roanoke, and as we near her border, we'll head back up north on I-81, exploring more of Virginia's many moods. About a half-hour north of Dulles Airport, Route 15 weaves its way through endless acres of lush green pastures. The area resembles the English Midlands more so than any place else this side of the Atlantic. It is therefore not much of a coincidence that Loudoun County has come to be called the hunt capital of America. Morven Park, the former home of Governor Westmoreland Davis, serves as the nucleus for the area's dedicated fox hunting community. Their Museum of Hounds and Hunting traces the history of hunting in Northern Virginia. American hunt clubs have always adhered to the traditions of the British Isles, but the hunt is more of a social sport in the States than a blood sport, as David Moyes of the Loudoun County Hunt Club explains.
We tend to take care of the fox here. We don't try to kill it. It does happen. To say otherwise would be unfair, but usually it happens more by accident than on purpose. The sport is oriented around watching the hounds hunt as a pack and staying as close to them as possible, which is very difficult because you have to gallop across unknown country. Hounds move very quickly, and it's really exciting to try and stay with them as they follow the fox.
Moving on, 15 South provided a picturesque path to Interstate 66 West. A couple of hours later, we were in Front Royal, the gateway to Shenandoah National Park. Outside of town lies the entrance to Skyline Drive, escort extraordinaire through the park. The 105-mile drive was designed for optimal viewing of the spectacular Shenandoah Valley. While many choose to scramble through the park by car, some opt to ramble on foot. Miles of maintained nature trails provide a hiker's utopia. 95 miles of the historic Appalachian Trail runs through Shenandoah as well. Al Kinney hiked the entire trail from Georgia to Maine a few years ago. This time, still kicking at 73, he was out hiking a scaled-down 2-week stretch of the trail with his family.
I've always liked this portion of the Appalachian Trail, mainly because it's the easiest portion.
Yeah.
So we brought new hikers out. We decided we'd better try some easy stuff first, because some of this trail gets pretty hairy.
But from what we could gather, those new hikers were loving every minute of it.
It's an enjoyable time out here. It gets you away from the everyday pressures of work and the stress and the strain, and just when you know you've climbed that mountain, it's a real accomplishment.
And after climbing that mountain, you can always collapse at one of the park's lodges. Skyland Lodge is a reincarnation of the original resort started in 1894 by George Freeman Pollock. A few miles down the road from Skyland, Big Meadows serves as a hub for park activities. If you're lucky, you may get to see naturalist Harry Lindsay out researching his birds of prey program.
We take these live birds throughout the park and show them to the park visitors and help them learn a little bit about and appreciate them more. All the birds that we have in the program are injured and cannot be returned back to the wild. They're on loan to us from the Virginia Wildlife Center. And so they have a very strong message to share with park visitors because of those injuries. That's something that we want to prevent, and they help us tell that quite well.
Human negligence is an obstacle Mother Nature has fought hard to overcome since Shenandoah National Park's inception in 1936. And she just may be winning the fight.
It's what we call a recycled park, meaning that there were people living here. It wasn't a Yellowstone or Yosemite, which was what we call pristine wilderness, where no one was inhabiting the area and it was set aside as a national park. There were people living up here for 100, 200 years. And for the most part, the trees had been cut down. There were very few virgin trees here. But once the park was established, nature was kind of invited back in and allowed to reclaim the land.
Skyline Drive and Shenandoah National Park end at Rockfish Gap.
and the Blue Ridge Parkway takes over. Not long after the parkway begins, you've got the opportunity to treat yourself to something special. Only a mile off Route 664 lies the Wintergreen Resort, a haven for sports enthusiasts. The resort, covering 11,000 acres, offers everything from trotting in the Shenandoah Valley to teeing off amidst the Blue Ridge Mountains. Heading south on the Blue Ridge Parkway, it's a scenic 3-hour drive to Roanoke, the largest city in southwestern Virginia. Roanoke is called the Star City of the South because of the economic boom it experienced after World War II, and that boom hasn't busted yet. It continues to breathe life into the city, and downtown Roanoke has become quite the place to spend a day. One of the country's oldest farmers markets now operates side by side with trendy shops and galleries. Ezra Wirtz's family has had a stall at the market for over 40 years, and he welcomes the newcomers.
It's better since the other businesses come to the market, like all the retail shops, the galleries and the shops around has helped the farmers market. They draw a clientele of people down that we have a chance to sell to that we used to didn't see. All of us working together is what's made it what it is, and it's great.
Another of Roanoke's many nicknames is the Festival City. We were there to catch Festival in the Park, a lively display of the city's thriving art scene. We met Eric Fitzpatrick, one of Roanoke's hottest artists at the festival. Eric's watercolors offer witty interpretations of life in Roanoke. We were anxious to find out more about Mr. Fitzpatrick, so we ventured to his home/gallery on Richelieu Avenue the following day and had a nice little heart-to-heart. Interestingly enough, Eric has no idea why his art is so popular.
I'm not sure. To tell you the truth, I've always wondered, there's something there that they relate to. Certainly I paint subject matters around here that they have seen, that they have been a part of. So perhaps they're relating to that. Also, the treatment of it. I guess I like this place so much that it shows. And if I love something, it's going to turn out well as far as an image is concerned. So maybe that's what they pick up on. Roanoke is where I belong. Roanoke has always been just a very deep part of me. And a few years ago, I realized that this is where I should be the rest of my life. This is where I should be painting. This is where I should be living. It all agrees with me down here somewhere deeply, and I never plan to move.
Eric's enthusiasm really made us want to explore the area around Roanoke. So we decided to drive out to the Booker T. Washington National Monument in Hardy, Virginia. The monument is on the actual site where the famed black educator spent the first 9 years of his life as a slave.
The ground that I'm walking on was Booker's bed. He shared the cabin with his mother, Jane, who was the cook, his older brother, John, and his younger sister, Amanda. The flies that you see running around are sisters and brothers to the ones that were here when Booker was here. There is no windows. So in the cold, they had to open the windows so light could come in. It was very hot in summer and freezing in the winter.
For Washington, it was a long, triumphant journey from Hardy, Virginia to Tuskegee, Alabama, as Chief Ranger Richard Saunders tells it.
Up until the time that the Emancipation Proclamation, Booker was not allowed to learn to read or write. And it was not until after that that the slaves were freed that he started to pursue his education. For the most part, Booker taught himself all of his education until he attended his first formal school, Hampton University. And there he graduated, and then after that he taught for about 2 years at Hampton. And then after that he was asked to go to Tuskegee, Alabama to establish Tuskegee Institute, which was what he was course, famous for. He was a very famous educator.
Heading south towards the Virginia-North Carolina border and the Blue Ridge Parkway, we experienced some of the mountain mist that's fairly common down here. Certainly didn't mar our enjoyment of the scenery, which is among the loveliest on the parkway. At milepost 176 stands one of the most photographed spots on the parkway. Mabry Mill, started by Ed Mabry in 1910, provided essentials for nearby mountain families for 25 years. Now run by the Park Service, the mill still turns, providing nostalgic scenery and culinary delights for hungry parkway travelers. A restaurant at Mabry Mill serves all sorts of wonderful dishes that have been ground on site. You can take a little of this place home with you, and we highly recommend it. The mill isn't the only remnant of mountain life that lives on here. On Sunday afternoons, locals pour into Mabry Mill and Flatfoot to traditional southern Appalachian mountain music. Mountain heritage flourishes throughout southwest Virginia. We decided to bid a fond farewell to the Blue Ridge Parkway and visit a town that epitomizes the spirit of the region. Route 58 East runs right into Galax, Virginia, home of the world-famous Fiddlers Convention held every August. Well, we weren't there in August, but we did find a place in town that revealed another rich layer of mountain creativity. Rooftop of Virginia Crafts is a large, cheerful place dedicated to showcasing local artists. Joyce and Duke Addis have combined the area's abundant apple crop with a touch of ingenuity and sell the final product here at Rooftop. In fact, their applehead dolls are among the most popular items on display. We asked Joyce to demonstrate the art of applehead doll making for us.
I peel the apple and then I carve it down, which takes about an hour. And I'll hang it to dry. I wash it real well with water and hang it to dry, and it takes about 6 weeks. You just don't know what to expect. And as it dries, it depends on the sugar content and the type of apple, and it'll depend on the color of the skin. If it's going to be dark, kind of red, like an Indian. And sometimes you can get some real quaint expressions out of these dolls, like a real person. Yeah. So that excites me.
Joyce sews her dolls' clothes and hats to cleverly complement their personalities. She even shapes those little shoes and animals out of clay. After steering our way through a wonderful mountain odyssey, we decided to shift gears and take Interstate 81 to one of the natural wonders of the world. 2 hours from Galax, Natural Bridge is an awesome 215-foot slab of limestone rock weighing 36,000 tons. The bridge has overwhelmed many before us. George Washington has carved his name on it, and Thomas Jefferson once bought Natural Bridge and 156 surrounding acres for a mere 20 shillings. "20 minutes up the road, Lexington, Virginia has been faithfully restored to its pre-Civil War glory days. Confederate hero Thomas Stonewall Jackson owned a home on Washington Street while teaching at nearby Virginia Military Institute. His life in Lexington is vividly displayed at the VMI Museum. Now, although Jackson was a hero of the war, museum director Keith Gibson dispels any illusions that he was a powerful classroom professor.
Well, Jackson came to Lexington and VMI in 1851 when he was appointed to the position of professor of natural philosophy and artillery tactics. The natural philosophy part was sort of a strain for Jackson, but the professor of artillery tactics was much more to his liking. And where he was a bit stiff in the classroom, he really excelled when he went out onto the parade ground with the cannons and taught the cadets in artillery.
Some of the more curious items on display are Jackson's war horse, Little Sorrel, and the raincoat he was wearing one dismal day in 1863 when he was accidentally shot on the arm by his own troops. The bullet wound was ultimately responsible for Jackson's untimely demise. Almost a year to the day after Jackson's death, a dramatic saga unfolded at VMI. 250 cadets were called on to serve the Confederate cause as reserves at the impending Battle of Newmarket, 80 miles to the north. Keith Gibson laid out the scene on the battlefield for us.
The cadets were not to be used as frontline troops. They were untried, they were young, they were college students, called out of their classroom, not hardened veterans. They joined the Confederate forces in the second ranks, but as fate may have it, in the course of battle, in the confusion of battle, they were ordered in to fill a breach in the Confederate line at a very critical moment of the Confederate advance. Their doing so, according to General Breckinridge, the Confederate commander, saved the day for his forces.
Virginia Military Institute maintains the Newmarket battlefield as a tribute to all heroes of the Civil War.
Today, the critical parts of the battlefield are preserved along with the Bushong House and the Hall of Valor Museum, which dramatically tells the story of the Confederate forces, the clash between the North and the South here, and the impact it had on the otherwise tranquil agricultural community that the Shenandoah Valley was before and is today. And the Hall of Valor attempts to demonstrate not only the impact on those civilians, but the impact on those young men, the Cadet Corps from VMI, and those others that served here, north and south.
Just south of Newmarket, Virginia, a hauntingly beautiful phenomenon captivates thousands every year. Endless Caverns is an elaborate subterranean maze of stalactites and stalagmites formed over millions of years by water seeping through its limestone walls. A light sweater is recommended for cavern carousing, as it retains a year-round temperature of 55 degrees, even when it's 100 degrees outside. The cave had produced a powerful desire to keep cool, so we took Route 211 east and headed for Luray, Virginia, home of Shenandoah River Outfitters. How's this for a pleasant scenario?
People go canoeing on the Shenandoah, and they just kind of lay back for the day, pack their coolers, have a nice, enjoyable day. They might stop on the side and have a picnic lunch. And they do a little fishing. The South Fork has the best smallmouth bass in the whole entire state of Virginia. And take and catch your dinner and camp alongside the river, spend the weekend, maybe do a little bit of tubing, swim a little bit.
Where else can you segue from endless caverns to endless possibilities? We chose to spend the last night of our trip just south of Luray in Stanley, Virginia. As soon as we got there, we took an evening stroll through the Shenandoah Valley on some Norwegian fjords. Confused? The fjords are magnificent horses bred at the Jordan Hollow Farm Inn, one of the more comfortable overnight stops we've encountered on our travels, and a perfect way to end our Virginia road trip. We're heading to Vermont for a fall foliage fantasy adventure, Leaf Peeper's Paradise. Taking major highways to the northern part of the state, where the season arrives first, we'll saunter southward on beautiful back roads with the colors of autumn bursting forth around us. Along the way, we'll be stopping in charming little towns, meeting the people who add their own touch of color to the Green Mountain State. And finally, we'll be visiting Stockbridge, Massachusetts, where one of America's most beloved artists, Norman Rockwell, lived. Our autumn odyssey took us on a 4-hour journey north out of Hartford, Connecticut, with I-91 and I-89 paving convenient paths to our first destination. Up until a few years ago, Waterbury, Vermont was a quiet rural town. These days, folks are flocking here from all over to get a taste of the place.
Just another typical day at Ben & Jerry's, you know? Ben & Jerry's enormous ice cream factory in Waterbury has become the second biggest attraction in the state. Co-founder Jerry Greenfield may not be exactly sure why visiting the factory is so popular, but he sure knows why the ice cream is.
All our dairy products in our ice cream come from Vermont. So we have all Vermont cream and all Vermont milk. And, you know, as you can see around you, Vermont is really the land of clean air and green fields and, you know, wonderful water and beautiful mountains. And I think the cows are really happy and healthy, and they make wonderful milk.
Ben & Jerry's ever-escalating empire, which, by the way, began with a $5 correspondence course in ice cream making, has been hailed by many as the best ice cream in the world.
Ben & Jerry's is incredible because it's so chunky. It's really chunky. If you want the chunks, you got to have Ben & Jerry's.
Many admire more than just their product. Ben & Jerry's has been at the forefront of a burgeoning trend in corporate caring.
We consider ourselves to be a company that's values-led as opposed to profits-driven, and we try to incorporate social components into everything we do, and I think we're showing that a business can be a caring company and still make money. And, you know, I think other companies are going to look at us and say, yeah, you can do it, it works.
The fragrance of fall prevails just up the road from Ben & Jerry's at the Cold Hollow Cider Mill, where visitors are privy to cider-making secrets. The Cold Hollow gift shop is an apple lover's delight. With the scent of hot cider donuts filling the air, visitors can choose from an extraordinary number of apple-related products, as well as other Vermont food items. Cold Hollow's biggest crowd pleaser, though, is cider jelly, made on the premises the old-fashioned way, as owner Eric Chittenden demonstrated for us.
What we're making is a pure cider jelly, and it's simply a concentrated apple cider. It's a real unique product to Vermont and indigenous to the area. And there are only 2 or 3 of us in the country that make it now. And we're all from Vermont, although it used to be a staple.
Vermont can get pretty populated in the peak foliage season, but Eric's wife, Francine, offered some helpful hints for getting around the crowds.
One of the things that we find a lot of people benefit from is asking questions and asking all the local people here are wonderful. They really treat people very well. And I think if you just ask somebody, they'll be more than happy to explain to you where you ought to go, where you ought to stay away from, because it might be too crowded that time of the day. And, you know, I think you'd find everyone is willing to give you a hand there. Just ask.
So ask we did, which led us to Shimmering Glass, a local studio and gallery run by stained glass artist Susan Bayer Fishman. Her attention to color vibrantly captures Vermont's idyllic landscapes.
A lot of my commissions are, people want a very open feeling and very flowing look. Now a lot of that I end up doing in kind of Vermonty pastoral scenes with birds and mountains. I also do more abstract pieces, but I think it's the feeling that people want. But when they come to Vermont, definitely people are attracted to the hills and the wildlife, and so I do get a lot of people that want to take a piece of that home.
Our next stop was in nearby Stowe, where we cruised up the scenic toll road. From high atop Mount Mansfield, we admired the varicolored visuals of Vermont.
"45 minutes west of Waterbury in Shelburne, Vermont, the Shelburne Museum is a 45-acre fortress of folk art.
The Shelburne Museum is the realized dream of Electra Havemeyer Webb. Born into a proper New York family, she began collecting her art and baffling her parents early on, as museum curator Bob Shaw explains.
Her family certainly thought that she was a little bit off in the things that she was collecting. When she brought her first cigar store Indian in 1907, she brought it home to her mother, who collected Monets and Manets, and her mother said, "What the heck is that?" She was shocked, and Electra could have backed down and said, oh, it's nothing, it's just something I saw along the roadside, thought it was kind of fun, I'd bring it home. But she said, Mother, I bought a work of art. And I think her mother must have swooned.
80,000 purchases later, Electra Webb's folk art collection is among the finest in the world.
I think that the museum is so popular because, well, for a couple of reasons. I think one, because there is such a variety here. There really is something for everybody. The kids can run around the 220-foot steamboat or go in the lighthouse. People who are seriously interested in paintings or in folk art or in furniture are offered some of the best collections in the country. And I think the other thing that's great and helps make this museum popular is the presentation. The grounds are beautiful all through the year. You can walk anywhere outside and enjoy a New England experience there. The architecture is beautiful. So that there's a real wide variety here for everybody.
Just 2 miles from the Shelburne Museum, open-air wagons carry visitors through Shelburne Farm's beautifully landscaped grounds. The 90-minute ride offers a glimpse of the farm's cheese-making operation, an award-winning cheddar sold at their well-stocked gift shop. After making our purchases, we ambled a half-hour south on Route 7 to Middlebury, Vermont. It's been said that all roads lead to Middlebury. Fortunately, they also lead to the Middlebury Inn, where weary travelers have been pampered for over a century and a half. The inn also houses a terrific restaurant, the oldest in town. With an abundance of history and no lack of charm, Middlebury embodies the essence of New England. The great poet Robert Frost gathered much of his inspiration in nearby Ripton, at the end of a lonely dirt road, where his cabin still stands. And in the fall, people like to walk a path near the cabin, reveling in the magnificent sights and sounds of autumn. Robert Pack, a distinguished poet himself and professor of English at Middlebury College, understands the universal appeal of Frost.
I've always admired Frost as a poet rooted in the landscape, who's a careful observer of the landscape, and whose poems are vivid because he knows a place very well. And I've also taken Frost as a model for clarity and narrative openness.
Professor Pack treated us to an autumnal poem from one of his own 11 books of poetry.
I'd like to read a poem called Epithalamium, which means wedding poem. But this is a poem as a wedding poem in a very special sense, because it's really about the wedding of the mind or the eye and the imagination with the autumn landscape. Epithalamium. What in hell is going on? This autumn flare-up startles into song every red and orange that my eyes have romped among. Never have I seen grass glow so frosted thick, the doomed leaves blaze as if this dawn were the beginning of their quick days. Fornicators, arise. This is the dawn to dance your heat, although you feel the final pallor creeping upwards in your feet. Mate eye to orange leaf, mate yellow leaf to field, your red strewn out, and hotly stroll the hill. This is the promised land, rejoicers joy about. Red, red, I come to greet you, friends, so come with me to handle hallelujah voices flaming yellow with this tree. In my heart's home, I know white winter doom. I know red bliss. By heaven, someone must make wedding music for all this.
Welcome back to Middlebury, Vermont, where locally based artist Woody Jackson has managed to set off what you'd have to call Moo Mania. Behind the doors of Holy Cow, his shop and catalog headquarters on Seymour Street, Woody has painted his Holstein cows into the hearts of America.
Cows have been sort of a popular image through the ages, but I think my particular designs were,
fun and also really modern. And so you could wear a cow on your shirt and not be embarrassed that, oh, you know, hokey-looking cow there. You know, it was a really classic-looking piece of art.
Though most often seen gracing Ben & Jerry's ice cream containers, Woody's cows liven up everything from underwear to golf balls. People find them utterly irresistible.
You know, I'm doing things that I really like to do. I mean, the cows developed out of just my artwork and love for them and this area. It's hard for me to really sort of design for a market. Yeah, it has to be something that I really feel about, you know, and then I can sort of bring my other talents to bear on it.
Continuing on a well-trodden course, we stop by the University of Vermont's Morgan Horse Farm, just west of town. The farm is dedicated to the growth and improvement of America's first breed, which is also Vermont's state animal. With their compact, muscular bodies, Morgans have played a great role in American history. Picking up Route 7 in Middlebury, we made our way south and then east on Route 4. 2 hours later, we were ushered into the popular little town of Woodstock. Reminiscent of a quaint English village, Woodstock's bounty of old-fashioned shops, set in picture-perfect surroundings, keeps the town humming with activity throughout the fall. A half hour south of Woodstock lies Plymouth Notch, birthplace of our nation's 30th president, Calvin Coolidge. Not only has the president's home been preserved, but the entire village around it. Site Administrator William Jenny spoke with us about this remarkable homestead.
Plymouth Notch has a lot of intriguing aspects. People come here not only to see the Coolidge Association, but to see what rural Vermont used to be like. The town has virtually remained the same since Calvin Coolidge's time here back in the late 19th, early 20th century.
It was here, under highly unusual circumstances, that Calvin Coolidge was sworn in as president.
Early in the morning of August 3rd, 1923, word arrived at Plymouth Notch that Warren G. Harding had died in office. Calvin Coolidge was up in Vermont visiting his parents at the time, and they called Washington to learn whether Calvin's father, Colonel John Coolidge, who was a notary public, could swear his son in as President of the United States. They learned that they could, and so Colonel John administered the oath of office here at the Coolidge homestead at 2:47 a.m. on August 3rd, 1923.
Calvin Coolidge was passionate about Vermont all his life. Perhaps his feelings are best expressed in a speech he made to Vermonters in 1928. Quote, "I love Vermont because of her hills and valleys, her scenery, and invigorating climate, but most of all because of her indomitable people." Vermont's exquisite backroad offerings are world-renowned. In the fall, a journey off the beaten path almost certainly assures a catch of treasures, both scenic and otherwise. For instance, on a quiet dirt road just off Route 100 near Wilmington, Vermont, we discovered the Hermitage Inn. Set amidst vast green mountain wilderness, innkeeper Jim McGovern has masterminded the ideal getaway for sluggish city folk.
We are a true New England country inn. We are on a dirt road, we are in the mountains, and, okay, we do what inns have done for years and years and years, just make people comfortable. It's not telephones in the room, it's not TV in the room. You're here to be in the country, and that's what we do best.
There's a multitude of autumnal activities for visitors to indulge in, whether it be taking a leisurely stroll around the grounds, or hunting a 900-acre preserve with a Hermitage-bred English setter, and feasting on Hermitage-raised game birds in the dining room each evening usually lifts guests into a fall food euphoria. The inn chef, Eric Treitz, busily whips up imaginative dishes like roast turkey with vegetable nut stuffing throughout the season. makes the mouth water just talking about it.
Pick up. Of course, Jim's always on hand to suggest which of his 40,000 bottles of wine best complements a meal.
Game in the fall and the fall vegetables all seem to go very well and are so much complemented by the wines that we serve here.
So, folks, if you're literally looking for a taste of New England, look no further than the Hermitage Inn. About 40 minutes west of Wilmington, old Bennington's towering Revolutionary War monument welcomes visitors in a most dignified manner. This lovely section of Bennington, Vermont, is where Robert Frost has chosen to spend his eternity. Since we were only about an hour from the heart of the Berkshire Mountains, we figured we'd take Route 7 south and join the sea of humanity that converges on the tiny town of Stockbridge, Massachusetts, every fall. Stockbridge has a familiar feel to it even to first-time visitors, not implying it's typical, mind you, just that the revered artist Norman Rockwell lived here and painted here for a quarter of a century. The local Rockwell Museum houses some of his most famous works. Curator Maureen Hart-Hennessy spoke with us about the artist.
Rockwell was born during what's known as kind of the golden age of illustration, and from a very young age knew that this was what he wanted to do, was be an illustrator.
Rockwell's big break came in 1916 at the spry young age of 22, when his first Saturday Evening Post cover was commissioned.
He very bravely went down to the post offices in Philadelphia with a couple of ideas for covers. The Post was sort of the pinnacle. It was the magazine with the widest circulation in the country, so to get a Post cover meant that you had really made it. And for him to achieve that when he was only 22 was quite remarkable. He worked for the Post until 1963. So really, he and the Post sort of grew up together in the 20th century.
Though many of Rockwell's lesser-known illustrations reflect some of the nation's more serious moments, he is best remembered for his depictions of hometown Americana.
Rockwell himself said, "I paint life as I would like it to be." You know, there is that nostalgia for the happier, good old days, even though they may not really have been happier or any better than today is. There's a nostalgic sense that I think people have really come to love and have remembered him for over all these years.
Heading to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Our journey takes us through the western part of this vast wilderness, skirting the shores of the Great Lake, Superior. From the archaic elegance of the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore to the historic landmarks of a still thriving mining industry, the Upper Peninsula offers visitors a wide-open look at pristine and progressive areas living in virtual harmony. Join us on our exciting journey up to the Upper Peninsula. Michigan's Upper Peninsula lies almost 500 miles from the metropolitan madness of Detroit, and by local standards, that's a world away. We began our trip in Marquette, Michigan, the largest town in the UP, as the Upper Peninsula is usually referred to. With a population hovering at just over 30,000, Marquette is a bustling, but not too bustling, university town on Lake Superior. It should certainly come as no surprise that one of the most popular activities around here is charter fishing. Captain Jim Mackey of the Catch-A-Fin spends warm weather months ferrying people out into the clean, fish-filled waters of Lake Superior.
The quality of the fish and the fish are so plentiful out here that we've got a good supply of fish, lake trout, salmon, and that. And being on a charter boat, we know the captains. We know where to fish, and it's fairly easy for the clientele to land quite a few fish during the day.
The first order of business is always finding a place to drop anchor.
There's some other smaller fish here. You can see the small dots. Yeah, right here is where the boat is. Right.
Next, Captain Jim preps eager amateurs on how to handle his rods. The process is slightly more advanced than throwing a piece of string into a fishing hole.
Most of the time, the people get a real thrill coming out here because a lot of them have never fished out in the Great Lakes. and this type of fishing with the downriggers and the releases. And when they get a fish, we get quite a few of them that run in from the 5 to 10, 12 pound, 15 pound range. And to most people, that's probably the biggest fish they've ever seen or ever even dreamed of catching.
It's the biggest fish I've ever caught.
Well,
All right,
okay.
We've got a new world record here.
See, this is, that's a lake trout.
Woohoo!
A day on the lake leaves most folks feeling exhausted, exhilarated, and ready for one hell of a fish fry. "40 minutes east of Marquette, interpretive specialist Greg Bruff prepared us for an offshore excursion along Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore.
They are cliffs that range anywhere from 50 to 200 feet off of Lake Superior.
Very few half-a-billion-year-old rocks manage to keep up appearances as well as these do.
Well, the pictured rocks get their names from the different minerals that come out of the sandstone. The black is from manganese dioxide. The red and orange are from iron, and the green is from copper that's found in the sandstone. Pictured rocks are made of sediments that were eroded from a mountain range that used to be south of here that was probably as large or larger than the Alps.
The pictured rocks may no longer stand as tall as a mountain range, but they're certainly every bit as magnificent. Helping document the UP's brilliant scenery is one of the nation's foremost landscape artists, Nita Engel. A UP native, Nita spends much of the winter lecturing around the world, but the rest of the year is spent painting at her lakefront home near Marquette.
I can now live wherever I want to live, and I chose to come back here. It's still 90% wilderness, 98% wilderness in the Upper Peninsula, and I'm living right on the edge, right in the wilderness, on the beach. No roads, no towns, no farms. It's just the wilderness, the way it always has been.
Nita works in watercolors because she feels it's a medium that paints itself. Using a variety of original techniques, she's able to set the stage for marvelous things to happen.
I want people to feel like they're in the scene. When you're sitting in a chair reading a book, you're wherever they tell you you are. You're not aware you're sitting in a chair reading a book. You're off in Spain or wherever the author tells you you are. I want you to get buried in a painting this way. It's not as possible, but I tried.
With such a large part of the population holed up in concrete jungles, Nita's paintings often serve as soothing substitutes to folks who long for the real thing.
I think people have a need to get back to the land and to the wilderness, and people are even saying that to me now who live in cities. That's why they buy the prints and the paintings, because it gives them a little escape to be somewhere else.
And realistically speaking, there are few more pleasant places in this world than those on Nita Engel's canvas. A half-hour northwest of Marquette, Big Bay, Michigan made headlines years ago when Jimmy Stewart, Lee Remick, and other Hollywood stars came to town to film the classic Anatomy of a Murder. This seemingly sedate town was the site of the actual murder the movie was based on. Years later, folks still come to check out silver screen landmarks like the Thunder Bay Inn. Others seek out the solitude of the Big Bay Point Lighthouse Bed and Breakfast.
If you use the true meaning of bed and breakfast as Michigan does, why, there is no other one in the United States.
Lighthouse keeper Buck Gottschall lives an idyllic lifestyle in Big Bay with his wife, Marilyn. Together, they've established an atmosphere of warmth and comfort that is rarely lost on big city guests.
It could be the first day they'll want to rush up and get everything done and run out into the woods and see this and see that. By the third day that they're here, they're just so relaxed and so at home, they just don't want to leave and get back into that city stressful life.
Among other things, lighthouse guests are proclaimed honorary lighthouse keepers upon arrival.
It's an awesome responsibility to be a lighthouse keeper.
This kind of clever interaction with guests has made the lighthouse a very popular spot, but its biggest boast is the location.
We have several things that I'm quite proud of, but foremost, I think, is that we have a full mile of Lake Superior frontage. No one else has that much frontage, commercially, I'm sure.
Over the years, publications around the country have written about the Big Bay Lighthouse, but Buck favors some prose offered by a local writer.
Dixie Franklin, our favorite writer, said that waves lapping on the shore, cradling guests to sleep, climbing boulder after boulder on this inland sea too wide to see across.
Sounds almost too good to be true. Just west of Marquette, on Route 28, the towns of Negaunee and Ishpeming are rich in iron industry lore. Retired mining executive Bert Boyum took us on a fascinating tour of the area, where high-grade ore was first discovered back in 1844.
Welcome to Jasper Knob, here in the city of Ishpeming. Ishpeming, in the Ojibwe language, means the high sacred place. And this is the place where mining started in 1848 on the hillside over here, and the mining then continued in under the town.
Although UP mines still produce a good percentage of our country's iron, many mines have closed. Remnants of a once thriving industry are everywhere. Some are even edible.
This is a Cornish pasty. It's the traditional meal that the miner would take underground. It's a self-contained meal. It's got potatoes, beefsteak, onions, and the yellow turnip. Underground, the miner could heat it by putting it on the shovel and putting candles underneath, and then it would be hot and tasty and ready to go.
No tour would be complete without a visit to the Iron Industry Museum in Negaunee. Locals, like Bert, are extremely proud of the way the museum chronicles the mining industry.
This is the Michigan Iron Industry Museum, located on the site of the original Carp River Forge. This is a museum that depicts the exploration and the development of iron mining on the 3 ranges in Michigan. It shows the mining equipment. It shows the evolution of the miners' lights, for example, an illustration of the tools that were used, and something about the social life of the miners here in Michigan. That's the end of our tour of iron mining in the Upper Peninsula. We hope that you'll come and visit us.
Porcupine Mountains Wilderness State Park is 63,000 acres of scenic splendor. Located a few hours west of Marquette, the Porkies, as everyone calls them around here, offer unlimited opportunities for those in need of some of nature's nourishment. In Silver City, located in the heart of the Porkies, we stop by the studio of photographer Dan Urbanski. For him, there's no place like the Porkies.
I'd like to say that, yeah, I'd be at home and would like to photograph things outdoors no matter where I was, but I really do feel dedicated to the Porcupine Mountains and the western Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I think I find that Lake of the Clouds is probably the place in the Porkies that I visit most often, and that has a lot to do with that it is visually interesting, and it also is varied. The scene changes dramatically even during the course of one day.
Dan finds particular satisfaction in venturing to little visited parts of the park.
You can enjoy solitude and all of Lake Superior as far as you can see. You can have it to yourself. That kind of sets the mood for getting creative with the camera. It's visually interesting because the rocks are tilted and angled down in toward Lake Superior, create strong angles in a photograph. There's a lot that can be done there. I kind of wish I could keep the secret all to myself, but there is also something that makes me want to share it with the rest of the world. And that is a lot of what my photography is about.
An hour and a half north of the Porkies, Route 26 runs into the towns of Houghton and Hancock. Situated at the foot of the Keweenaw Peninsula, thousands of Finnish immigrants descended upon the area in the late 1800s to work in the copper mines. Today, the Finnish culture is alive and thriving. Significant aspects of the Finnish-American experience can be found at the Heritage Center at Suomi College. Here, archivist Olaf Rankinen and historian Dan Mackey are busy preserving more than just the Finnish language. Olaf spoke of growing up in Finnish America.
I grew up on a Finnish farm where even the cows spoke Finnish, and the dogs. We did not know a word of English when we went to the country grade school, one-room schoolhouse with one teacher for about 35 children. So as far as we were concerned, it was Finland.
Among other things, the center houses important immigrant archives. It also showcases various aspects of modern Finnish life, like this tapestry exhibit. One of Dan Mackey's most gratifying projects is enlightening Finnish Americans to the Kalevala, Finland's national epic poem.
Well, Kalevala is a compilation of some of the epic folk poetry of the Finnish backwoods. It was very important in Finnish history. There probably might not be a country of Finland today because Finland had never been an independent country, and it was a revelation to Finnish people that something had been accomplished in their language, something great. The language is beautiful.
One of the most effective ways of keeping any cultural flourish is with a cunning culinary craft. Paula Rocco, owner of the Suomi Home Bakery and Restaurant in Houghton, serves up panukaku, a delicious Finnish-style pancake, all day long. At the turn of the century, Calumet was the home of copper barons and their money, lots of money. The town was so well off, in fact, the citizens decided to erect a splendid theater. The Calumet Theater's present executive director, Jim O'Brien, spoke of those glory days.
In the early years of the theater, many of the legends of the American stage appeared here. Sarah Bernhardt performed here, Lothian Russell, Maud Adams. During the 20s, as the mines declined and the world price of copper declined, it affected the local economy, and also the advent of the motion picture affected the type of entertainment that people became accustomed to. So by the mid-30s, it was pretty much a movie theater.
Thanks to the efforts of Jim and others, the beautifully renovated theater is again playing host to prominent touring companies and filling guests with rich memories of a glamorous bygone era. Venturing north on Route 26, we stumbled upon a truly fascinating find. In the tiny town of Eagle Harbor, the Jam Pot offers not only delicious jams and fruitcakes, but a look into a life that is little explored by the average person. You see, the Jam Pot is run by Brother Peter and Brother Stephen, both Benedictine monks.
The Jam Pot started out for us as a way to make a living, and it still does that, provides us with our living, and does increasingly well at it each year. But it has also become a tremendous vehicle for our apostolate, for spreading the word about ourselves and for getting our ideas out to the general public.
I look to you, O God, to be my strength this day. Alleluia.
The Jam Pot allows people to approach us, to approach monasticism. It allows people to ask questions, and many people do.
Best of all, it allows people to savor some of the tastiest jams around. After spending some truly memorable moments with our new friends, we headed north into the little town of Copper Harbor. Snugly situated along Lake Superior shores, the town is the epitome of quaint, complete with its own one-room schoolhouse. Highlighting a visit here, local naturalist Jim Rooks takes people up to Estevant Pines, 600 acres of virgin pine he helped preserve.
When the campaign to save the pines was over, I was left with that one phrase that always stuck in my mind: a quiet full of noise in a slightly wooded place. And that's what we were left with. We were left with this one little patch of pine, and when you walked into the pine, you left all noise behind you. It was the ultimate in quiet noise.
Jim has one wish to send visitors home with.
I would like them to take the solitude with them so they could be at peace wherever they went back to. I don't know how long that will last, but I'm sure that's why people come back here.
Our final stop in the area was, appropriately enough, at the last place on Earth. That's where Tom Manico has made a name for himself carving beautiful wooden spoons.
They're made with a lot of care. I'm not punching them out. In other words, I'm not making a whole bunch of spoons, but the spoons are different. They go with the flow of the wood, and it's a natural type of thing.
Using mostly wood that's indigenous to the Keweenaw Peninsula, Tom finds it's one of many advantages of living here.
You don't have the hustle and bustle of city life. It's very laid back and relaxed. I'm working out here, and if I decide that, hey, it's getting too sawdusty in here, I just walk outside and maybe I'll get another idea by looking at a tree.
And what truly sets his spoons apart from others?
I take an awful lot of time on the final finishing, and it's the feel, it's the touch value. As soon as you touch one of the spoons, you become captivated that you must own it. And it's good.
Well, folks, we're out of time. We hope you were as dazzled by Michigan's Upper Peninsula as we were, and we certainly hope our little armchair adventure has enticed you to want to get out and experience the back roads of America firsthand. I'm Steve Fox. I'll see you in our next American Road Trip. Hi, I'm Steve Fox. Welcome to American Road Trips, the program that explores the back roads and scenic byways of America. Our journey takes us north out of Phoenix, Arizona, towards Grand Canyon National Park and on into Utah, where we will explore a plethora of parks in the southern part of the state. We'll be stopping at plenty of great places, meeting terrific people, and uncovering delightful treasures along the way. Heading out of Phoenix on routes 60, 89, and 93 towards Wickenburg, you tend to feel like you've stepped back in time. Long called the Dude Ranch capital of the world, things haven't changed much around here since the last century. The Desert Caballeros Museum in Wickenburg pays tribute to the early settlers who put the area's dry, arid land to prosperous use. Right across from the museum is the old jail tree, used back in the days before there was a real place to stash the bad guys. Turning north on Route 89, just past Wickenburg, the feeling prevails. The mood is quiet, the pace is most definitely slow, and the feeling is nostalgic. We took 89A north to our next stop, Jerome, Arizona. Until recently, Jerome was a worn-out little town that had seen better days. Almost $1 billion worth of copper, silver, and gold were hauled from the mountains around Jerome in the first half of the 20th century. Today, Jerome is on the upswing, with colorful craft shops bringing new life to the historic town. Even in an unseasonable mid-March snowfall, we found Jerome to be a charming little place. Just half an hour north of Jerome, on Route 89A, colorful red rock formations begin dotting the landscape, reaching a spectacular peak in Sedona, Arizona. Sedona is known as an artist colony, and since Southwestern-inspired crafts seem to be all the rage these days, we figured we'd visit a place in town and see what all the hoopla is about. Modeled after a Mexican village, Tlaquepaque, that's what they call it, allows you to see the artists making things in their shops. At El Dorado, Pamela Ascalise strings lovely necklaces in Southwestern fashion. And over at the Art of Glassblowing, Phil Jordan is always melting down something with a regional flavor.
Most of our business is tourist business here, and they like to take home something that pertains to the Southwest. So they keep me busy making cactuses, mostly.
Upstairs at the Mountain Trails Gallery, you can usually find Ken Payne carving his intricate clay pieces and talking about them, too.
We're doing it's going to be a sacred buffalo. To the Indians, the white buffalo was very rare, and it was very sacred to them. This one will be white, and that can be done with nickel silver, or it can be done with bismuth nitrate.
While Ken Payne bases his sculptures on Western legends, Rig Westby, also at Mountain Trails, finds his ideas a bit closer to home.
Sometimes I say I'm a retired cowboy because I don't do it as much as I used to. But that's how I got into Western art in the first place, was actual ranch experience. I used to work on some of the biggest ranches in the West. And so most of my artwork stems from actual experience.
The romanticism of the Old West lives on through the eyes of cowboy artists like Rig. Back in 1965 at the Oak Creek Tavern in downtown Sedona, a group of cowboy artists got together and formed the Cowboy Artists of America. Joe Beeler was at the tavern that momentous day, and a visit to his studio revealed the group is working harder than ever to expose the pride and courage of the cowboy to the rest of the world.
It went from like zero. When I started out, there were no galleries or no, no publications, no shows for Western art, and a lot of this has grown up and evolved through our group. And so, I mean, there's a great number of collectors all over the United States and abroad that appreciate our culture, the cowboy and the Western lifestyle, and the art sold very well, and there's great interest among serious collectors. Buckshot, come on.
Real-life experiences are what make a cowboy artist's work so special, and Joe Beeler is an inspiration to a whole new generation of artists.
I feel like I'm carrying on a tradition that's been handed down by other artists. I've been at it a long time, I guess, and been relatively successful, and I guess maybe some of the other younger artists have looked at me and say, well, gosh, if he can do it, so can I. And if that is a fact, I'm proud of that. If the younger artists look at some of my work and look at our life and say, well, that's the way I want to be, why, that makes me feel proud.
Meeting Joe was a humbling experience for us city folk. We could have stayed weeks, but it was time to move on. A few hours from Sedona, past Flagstaff, there's a turnoff to Sunset Crater National Monument and Wupaki National Monument. It is well worth turning off and looping through these two fascinating sites. Sunset Crater is the remains of a 900-year-old volcanic eruption, the last ever in Arizona. Its towering 1,000-foot cinder cone and massive lava flows amidst the San Francisco mountains are an eerie yet awesome phenomenon. 20 miles up the road, painted desert off in the distance, lie the Wupaki ruins. Chief Ranger Anna Marie Fender took us on a captivating tour through this prehistoric Anasazi Indian site, dating back to the 12th century. Wupaki is the largest Indian ruin in the area, but several other prehistoric sites are nearby. Route 89 North hits Route 64 West near Cameron, Arizona, and 64 leads into magic. The Grand Canyon had us under its spell from the moment we drove into the park. There's so much to see and do here, it's hard to know where to start. We began by stopping by the Visitor Center for up-to-date maps and information. Then we checked out an interpretive program that helped orientate us to the park.
Well-maintained trails that come down from the south rim. And if any of you are interested in hiking and have never hiked in Grand Canyon before, I strongly urge you to stay with one of these two maintained trails.
Next, we hooked up with Grand Canyon mule trips at Bright Angel Lodge and tried not to let local impresario Ron Clayton scare us off.
You all make up your mind this morning while I'm talking to you whether or not you want to do this, whether or not you can do it. If you'd like to change your mind this morning when I get through talking to you, I will cheerfully refund your money. But if you get on my mule and go 10 feet down that trail and change your mind, I'm going to keep your money just for the aggravation you caused me.
Spaces fill up quickly on mule trips, so be sure and reserve early. Everyone says overnight hikes are a remarkable experience. Though trailblazer Owen Connell had only one thing on his mind after 12 days in the canyon.
I want to take a hot shower. I'm surprised you can stand as close to me as you are.
I haven't been able to bathe in 5 days.
And for a cleaner jaunt, there's the return of the Grand Canyon Railway. For the first time in over 2 decades, visitors can take a scenic 2.5-hour steam train ride into the old Grand Canyon Depot. And just when we'd reached unparalleled levels of indulgence, our day soared to an end with an aerial tour of the canyon with Grand Canyon helicopters. The sunlight on the canyon was a marvel to see from above. The ride was simply breathtaking. We exited the park the same way we'd entered, making a left onto Route 89 north in Cameron. This is the beginning of Navajo Nation, a massive reservation covering 26,000 square miles over 3 states. Continuing our journey through Navajo Nation, we stumbled upon a very special place, started by a very special couple in the middle of nowhere. Harry Goulding and his wife Mike came to Monument Valley in the early 1920s, setting up a trading post just over the Utah border. Eventually, they added rooms with a view, a dining room cooking up the meanest Navajo tacos around, a curio shop promoting local Indian crafts, all this smack dab in the middle of Monument Valley. Current lodge owner Gerald LaFont tells a classic Goulding tale.
Whenever the 30s came around, the Navajos, well, the reservation was kind of hit, with not very much business, and things were pretty slim out here and poor. And Harry Goulding thought, with all this beautiful scenery, that if anybody from Hollywood would see pictures from Monument Valley, they'd certainly want to come out and take pictures. And he had a whole bunch of photographs, and he and Mike, I think, they tell me that they had about $30 in their pocket, and they drove out there and tried to get a hold of John Ford, and of course the secretary stopped them all the way. So the story is he says, well, I got plenty of time, I got my sleeping bag here, and laid it out on the floor, and I guess it wasn't long, John Ford come, stumbling downstairs and says, who is this guy? And I guess he started showing him the pictures. And as I understand, at that point in time, they advanced Harry Goulding money right at that point in time, so when he came through Flagstaff, he could pick up supplies, and I understand it was only about 3 or 4 weeks, and John Ford was here ready to shoot the picture. And that was, of course, Stagecoach.
The rest is celluloid history. Driving through Monument Valley and 163 North, familiar rock structures greeted us at every turn. Route 163 ends in Bluff, Utah, and Route 191 begins. Route 191 takes you through the little town of Blanding, Utah, situated dramatically at the foot of the Blue Mountains. We decided to check things out in little old Blanding. We followed road signs to edge of the Cedars State Park and Museum on the outskirts of town. Located near an ancient Anasazi Indian ruin, the museum has a reputable collection of Indian artifacts, most notably pottery. We were able to grasp the importance of a pot's roots or history with the help of curator Winston Hurst.
This wonderfully well-preserved example of an Anasazi cooking pot that had been wrapped in a yucca leaf net. We could go out this afternoon and I could take you down and I could show you exactly where this came from, and we could get into the documentation, into the report, and see that preserved forever is the information on how it fit into a particular Anasazi community. We'll always have that information on this pot.
So even though it may be fun hunting through an Indian ruin for treasures, an archaeologist is greatly hindered from studying a piece once it's been removed from its original site. Enduring Indian customs live on in Blanding as well. the Nations of the Four Corners Cultural Center vividly traces the path of humanity in the area. Director Cleo Bradford explains the concept.
The Nations of the Four Corners Cultural Center is an effort to portray the Ute, the Navajo Indian, the Spanish settler, and the Anglo European culture that settled in this area. In the 4 states in the Four Corners of Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, actually in the Four Corners area we have a culture of our own that kind of intertwines each of these cultures together.
My name is Davina Smith, and I'm a Navajo, and I would like to show this hogan. This is a male hogan. It's only used for ceremony purposes. Males are only allowed.
Colorful guides, often descendants of original settlers, conduct tours through flawlessly reconstructed homesteads. We were thoroughly entertained by the people of Blanding and enjoyed seeing firsthand how various cultures have blended harmoniously over the years. Besides that, the Indian bread they made for us was delicious. Heading west out of Blanding on the Bicentennial Highway, southern Utah's land of rainbow canyons gives new meaning to the phrase scenic route. Our journey on Utah's magnificent 133-mile Bicentennial Highway concludes in Hanksville. Be sure and fuel up both your vehicle and yourselves in Hanksville before moving on. At Hanksville, the road becomes 24 west, and the landscape continues to overwhelm. After about an hour of driving with our mouths literally agape, we were whisked into Capitol Reef National Park. Established in 1971, the park takes its name from domed rock formations reminiscent of our nation's Capitol building. Another distinctive feature at Capitol Reef are 1,000-year-old petroglyphs carved into the rock by Fremont Indians. It is believed the Indians carved hunters and bighorn sheep into the rock to bring them luck during hunting season. Just beyond Capitol Reef, the Boulder Mountain section of Route 12 South serves as a picture-perfect passageway to an erosional masterpiece. Named for early Mormon settler Ebenezer Bryce, Bryce Canyon is the result of 15 million years of uplifts and faults in the Earth's crust. Today, a national park, Bryce Canyon's lookout points offer panoramic views of intricate pinnacles and spires reflecting infinite shapes and hues. As old man Bryce used to say, it's a hell of a place to lose a cow. 84 miles south of Bryce Canyon lies yet another jewel of perfection, Zion National Park. Fittingly named for its holy-like atmosphere, the key to Zion's mysterious aura was unlocked by naturalist Kay Threlkeld.
This park is well known for its massive sandstone cliffs. This Navajo sandstone is as much as 2,000 feet thick in places. Originally, it was laid down during a time when this area was a massive sand dune, an enormous desert with winds blowing across, and so the sandstone is cross-bedded. You'll see a layer of strata going one direction, and then the wind shifts and it blows it back in another direction. You can actually drive through the bottom of the canyon here, which makes it a little bit different than many of the canyons in the Southwest. Instead of standing up on the rim looking down in the canyon, you get to be in the bottom with these massive sandstone cliffs coming up at you at either side.
Zion was magnificent, a highlight of our trip, and its bold images will linger in our memories for a long, long time. 9 West was the last route on our journey. It runs right into Interstate 15 South and an easy 4-hour drive to Las Vegas. For centuries, artists and writers have flocked to New Mexico in search of its supernatural beauty. The cultural blend of Spanish and Indian influences makes it one of America's most foreign and exotic states. Join us as we journey through the north of New Mexico, from Taos and the peaceful Pueblo villages in the upper Rio Grande Valley, and to the state capital of Santa Fe. We'll continue to migrate south to Albuquerque and recall the great desert spirits of the Salinas National Monuments. We began our odyssey to the northern part of New Mexico with a visit to Taos. After arriving at night at the historic Taos Inn, we awoke to the beauty of this southwestern ski town. Other ski resort towns in the west boast a 30 to 50-inch snow base. While we were in town, Taos Ski Valley, the favorite with most downhillers, proudly reported a base of 101 inches. A short walk from town makes one realize why so many artists have been attracted to Taos. At the turn of the century, 3 painters from the East Coast fell in love with the beauty of the area and soon formed the Taos Society of Artists. Later, some of the more well-known painters and writers were to follow. Georgia O'Keeffe, Ansel Adams, and D.H. Lawrence also found inspiration here.
It's an ideal place for artists, for instance, the incredible light and space.
A good representative of southwestern art is probably Taos's most famous resident, R.C. Gorman. The New York Times once called him the Picasso of Indian artists. A piece of work in his own right, he has earned a reputation for being quite a colorful character.
People always ask me, what does R.C. stand for? It stands for Rudolph Carl, and I'm not a Rudolph Carly sort of person.
Gorman is full-blooded Navajo. His modest upbringing was spent on the reservation with his family.
I have brothers and sisters all over the place. My father was a very active man when he was young.
His heritage is rich with the talents of remarkably creative people. The influence of artisans, holy men, and early tribal leaders surfaced for Gorman at an early age.
I didn't do it thinking I'm going to be an artist or anything like that. I just was.
Over the past 20 years, Gorman has been devoted to capturing the strength and grace of the Navajo woman.
There is a softness in the woman which reflects in the mountains. My women are earth ladies. They're my inspiration.
Gorman came to Taos in 1968. The community, known for its long-standing appreciation of the arts, accepted him immediately.
Taos, to me, is a home, and it's almost like a mother because I've felt embraced here, and if it wasn't for Taos, I wouldn't be as comfortable as I am.
Gorman's work has been displayed in literally hundreds of exhibitions throughout the world, and his masterpieces are sought after by celebrities. But where can the average person get a good Gorman painting?
I guess the best place to come is Taos. A lot of people come here to meet me. I'm always amused. It never bothers me. I have never refused an autograph, and I certainly have signed a lot in my day.
A friend of the writer D.H. Lawrence once told Gorman something very special about Taos, and he has never forgotten it.
There's magic here. And the magic is in the mountain. If the mountain doesn't like you, it'll spew you out, she used to tell me. Well, I haven't been spewed, so I guess the mountain likes me.
Just down the road from Gorman's gallery on Ladeau Street is a special treat for anyone who loves the look and history of the Southwest. The Martinez Hacienda is one of the few completely restored Spanish colonial haciendas from the early 1800s. Visitors are free to roam around this living museum and see craftsmen who create wooden treasures with the skill and sensitivity of masters. With the Taos Mountain in our rearview mirror, we hit the road. 20 minutes north of downtown, along US 64, you come across the famous Rio Grande River. Carving a gorge through this high desert region, the area south of Taos is named the Upper Rio Grande Valley. Among the many places not to be missed is a wide spot in the road called Ojo Caliente. The rich mineral waters that come from this area were considered sacred by prehistoric Pueblo Indians. They believed the volcanic springs to be the residing place of great spirits, and they respected its healing powers. Today, the springs attract those who come to take in the waters, which contain iron, soda, arsenic, and lithia, all elements used in treating ailments of the mind and body. No matter what your beliefs, Ojo Caliente will offer any weary traveler a chance to relax. About 2 hours south on 285, we sauntered into the sleepy New Mexican town of Chimayo. The 174-year-old Sanctuario de Chimayo may not attract as many pilgrims as the shrines of Lourdes and Fatima. However, for the Spanish people of Sangre de Cristo, this church has no peer.
It is a center of peace and healing.
During Holy Week, 10,000 pilgrims recreate the crucifixion and walk scores of miles to worship at the chapel. It is the sacred earth from a hole in a sanctum close to the altar that attracts them. Father Miguel explains.
This is the dirt that the people, they claim they are healed touching it.
Originally from Spain, Father Miguel feels very much at home in the Chimayo area.
The Hispanic character is very open, very friendly. They have maintained this kind of identity with the Spanish culture from Spain.
Another place that keeps the culture alive is Leona's tortilla stand, right next to the church. She makes you feel welcome with her hospitality and her mean chili quesadillas. The rural Chimayo Valley was made the eastern boundary of the province of New Mexico from 1598 to 1695. A stone's throw from the Sanctuario is the Ortega weaving shop.
Chimayo is one of the only places where weaving has survived time.
By the early 1800s, weavers from Spain were brought to New Mexico to teach weaving to the Santa Fe youth. This town has been the center ever since.
Weaving, as it's done today, is exactly the same as it was done in the early days.
8 generations of Ortegas have been Spanish weavers. David Ortega owns the weaving shop in town and gets a little help from his sons and his neighbors.
We are fortunate to be the family that has never let it die. And we are still trying to keep it going with the help of other families. We have people who weave for us from different little places surrounding our village.
David took us to Cundillo. In this little mountain village above Chimayo, weavers like Sam create masterpieces for the Ortegas.
These people make a livelihood with their cattle, with their gardening, and with their weaving. When you know how to weave and you are producing something beautiful, the individual gets the satisfaction of accomplishment. The silence of the threads going through his hands working in a rhythm is in itself a satisfaction. And it works very beautifully because each weaver has his own creative ability.
We thanked Sam and David and took advantage of the opportunity to fill her up at Sam's place. Our next stop, the Indian pueblos of San Ildefonso and Santa Clara. 30 miles south along State Highway 502 is the San Ildefonso Pueblo. These native people of the Upper Rio Valley are descendants of the Anasazi farmers dating back to over 2,000 years ago. The Tewa Indians are tremendously artistic and known for their beautiful pottery.
Most of the people here, I think they make their own style of pottery.
Meet Florence Naranjo. She lives quietly with her husband on the Pueblo. She weaves and cares for her family, but most importantly, she is a potter.
I started making pottery, and then my dad and I used to make pottery ourselves. And after he was gone, then my husband and I started doing our pottery work, so we both worked together with pottery.
Maria Martinez, a potter from the San Ildefonso Pueblo, made famous the style of black pottery in the 1920s. While many potters like Florence have kept the tradition alive, others have deviated from the conventional ways.
Right now, a lot of the younger generation are doing their own style of pottery making. Some of the older people, and they, like us, we keep to our own traditional pots that we've been making. Mostly for our design, it's just a feather design and then my dad's design. That's what we use on all our pots now. I know it takes a lot of patience, but when you love to do something, it's just naturally there that you do what you want to do.
These are people of the land.
We dig the clay from the earth, and then the paint that we use for the polishing and the paint that we use to paint the pottery, it all comes from earth. So mostly it's Mother Earth that we thank for having this pottery made.
They believe in a great clay spirit, one that they must befriend before any pottery is made.
I come down here and talk to the clay and work all day here down here. But most of the time I like to talk to the clay, and sometimes I always say, well, what kind of shape are you going to come out to? Or how do you want me to build you up? And if you talk to the clay, I guess it'll just say, well, then she wants me to make a piece like this, so I'll just go with her.
Florence mixes many different types of clays together to get the right consistency. When the pieces are fired in the outdoor pit, the clay turns black.
And the polishing and the painting is the hardest part on this pottery. It takes a long time to polish a piece of pottery. As it dries, the shine will come out.
Florence works out of her studio on the Pueblo. She sells only to the Museum of New Mexico in Santa Fe. Visitors are welcome to her studio, and she has a fairly consistent following.
They want to meet me, the maker. That's what they always say. They want to meet the maker of the pot.
From San Ildefonso, we made a right turn on Highway 30 and drove north to the Santa Clara Pueblo. This part of New Mexico is known as the 8 Northern Pueblos. We visited 2 of them.
There's a lot of potters in there where a lot of them are introducing whole new different styles.
We stopped in at the Merock Gallery and met Paul Speckeldrock, an artist and the gallery's owner. He represents about 30 different Native American artists. Paul has been noticing an increase in their popularity as artists, as well as new directions in their work.
There's a lot of people that are putting a lot of emphasis in the American Indian culture. The line that you draw between contemporary and traditional, it's always continually changes.
But usually these changes are subtle.
I believe the pottery will continue. It's a recognized fine art form.
One of the nice things about traveling into the Northern Pueblos is that you learn more about the people who are behind the art and about their native spirit. Who knows, you just might be able to make a great deal.
Any way that we possibly could to keep the cost down on our pottery here, we'd like to invite people to come out here and visit us.
From the Pueblos, we rambled south to the capital of New Mexico, Santa Fe. Founded in the winter of 1609, it's the oldest capital city in the United States. By 1849, stagecoaches were running from Independence, Missouri to Santa Fe along the trail, which ended right here in town.
The simplicity of New Mexico is one of its most appealing elements.
Christine Mather turned out to be a great person to meet in Santa Fe. She's the author of an architectural design book called Santa Fe Style. She explains that the distinct Southwest look could even be as simple as a string of dried chili peppers.
Everybody's very fond of that type of really simple decorative element that is quite unique to this part of the country.
The coming of the Spanish to the New World brought strong, vivid colors. People made use of them very quickly.
They really added a big splash to what was otherwise a fairly monotone palette of the earth itself. In New Mexico, you get this indigenous or this vernacular architecture that really doesn't occur anyplace else. When you wake up in the morning, you know where you are when you're here.
A place that you will want to wake up in is the historical La Posada de Santa Fe. This hotel's got all the class and the charm of the real Southwest. As classic as these New Mexican images are, there are also people who possess the spirit of this region. We met up with someone who put it all into perspective for us.
I don't care if they want to go rope stairs on it. They can go rope stairs on it. It'll hold up. I'm not worried about that.
We paid a visit to Slim Green, saddle maker and quintessential craftsman. He came out west 45 years ago by covered wagon, was instrumental in founding the Santa Fe Rodeo, and knows almost everyone. Slim can honestly say that he's been surprised a couple of times.
It's kind of nice when somebody walks up on a door and introduces himself as Robert Redford and then Robert Wagner and Jill St. John. It just floored me when people like that come in, and so they just started coming to me, and the minute I get something finished, it goes out.
You don't have to be a true horseman to own a Slim Green saddle. One time, Slim got an order from a wealthy fella in New York City.
I said, well, Mr. Shapiro, what kind of horse you got? He says, I don't have a horse. I said, what you going to do with a high-priced saddle like this? He said, I'm going to put it on a stand, use my coffee stand and my bar stool.
Any craftsman will tell you, your tools become your most valuable asset.
I started out making a few tools for myself, and then I gathered some, and as years went on, like all of the old saddle makers, the good old saddle makers, there was never any tools suited. So I've got about 250 to 300 tools over there, and I would say about 100 of them I made myself.
Unlike silver, gold, or other metals, leather can't be reused or recycled. If you aren't careful, Well, Slim will tell you.
If you mess up a piece of leather, you've got to wait 9 months for a calf to be born, 2 years for it to grow out, another year or two for it in a feedlot to grow out before that leather's any good. So you just don't dare waste that leather. To make a saddle, it's special. When you've been used to doing something with your hands and creating something that nobody else does like you do, you're happy.
We followed the Sangre de Cristo Mountains south from Santa Fe towards Albuquerque on State Highway 14. This less traveled road traces the Turquoise Trail. Sleepy villages along the trail, like Madrid, are relics of old mining towns from the 19th and 20th centuries. During the boom, these towns once produced the gemstone turquoise along with gold, silver, and coal. Albuquerque is known for its hot air ballooning. Every fall is the balloon fiesta. An important American icon, Route 66, runs right through downtown Albuquerque, along Central Avenue. You can get your kicks by roaming through classical theaters, historic hotels, and New Mexico's Old West. As you follow Route 66 out of Albuquerque, it turns into Interstate 40. Take it east for 30 miles until you come to the turnoff on Highway 337 to Mountain Air. The road over the Manzano Mountains is called Tijeras Pass because it was the easiest course through the mountains. It became a major trade route for the Spanish and Pueblo people. As 337 turns into 55, it descends into the Salinas Valley, and the New Mexico Mesa takes off. The roads seem to go on forever. In 1.5 hours, we neared the town of Mountain Air, or Gateway to the Ancient Cities. Salinas Monument is part of the National Park Service and the site of 3 ruins of ancient architecture.
Try to imagine 1,000 people functioning in a closely knit social environment successfully for 700 years.
Gary Swanson captures travelers' attention with stories of the past. These people were descendants of the Anasazi Pueblo culture.
The people that lived here relied upon other peoples. The Puebloans would trade pottery, they would trade corn, beans, squash, pinon nuts, pinon pitch. The Apache then enter into an economic relationship with the people of the Pueblos.
With the exploration of the New World, the Spanish came back with exotic foods, metals, and new ideas.
The Spanish, when they enter the area, are bringing with them also economic resources, especially the priests. So within the Pueblo, they're saying, oh, this is fine. We certainly welcome the economics of it. We don't necessarily welcome your intent to acculturate us.
A cooperative balance between the native cultures that had survived for centuries was changing.
The Apache eventually began to raid these Pueblos, and they began to take out reprisals against any Pueblo that contained a Spanish force.
By the late 1600s, all but the legacy remained.
Unfortunately, the people that lived here found themselves under some stress and made a decision to abandon this particular living site and move back to their ancestral homelands.
Between the years of 1965 and 68, an archaeologist undertook the job of excavating the central house mound. As a result, 226 living spaces were uncovered and artifacts were cataloged.
We learned about the people who lived here in a very personal sense. They lived here, they loved here, they had children here, they cried here, they died here.
We asked Gary what attracts people to a place like Salinas Monument.
It speaks to the heart. I believe they come to sit and to listen, and to watch the ravens, and to see that there isn't much that's changed here. It speaks to the past.
Today we'll be taking a drive down the alluring Natchez Trace Parkway, where history abounds for 450 miles from Nashville, Tennessee to Natchez, Mississippi. You see, the parkway, which is maintained by the National Park Service, parallels the old Natchez Trace, a trail dating back thousands of years and used by everyone from buffalo and Indians to fur traders and outlaws. Along the way, we'll venture off the trace, exploring the towns and meeting the people who have indelibly shaped the South. Our journey begins in Nashville, Tennessee. self-proclaimed country music capital of the world. Local clubs here spin out future stars faster than you can say Grand Ole Opry.
Thank you, friends. We appreciate y'all sticking around with us tonight. I'm Steve Hill. We're the Nashville Band, and we're going to have some fun tonight here at the Palace. Let's go back to the 50s one time. You shake my nerves and you ride on my brain. Too much of love drives this man insane. You broke my will, but what a thrill. Goodness gracious, great all the time. You took my love and you thought it was funny. You got my long and you moved me, honey. I'll change my mind.
Nashville's fertile country roots have been immortalized at the Country Music Hall of Fame on the city's renowned Music Row. Ranking among the most popular museums in the country, thousands of fans flock here each year, eager to get a peek behind the scenes of the country music industry. Nashville's most coveted hangout is on the Wall of Fame, where homage is paid to dozens of country music legends. The museum also pays tribute to movies with a country theme, like the Burt Reynolds blockbuster Smokey and the Bandit. And RCA's Studio B, the legendary recording studio, is now a part of the Hall of Fame. Director Bill Ivey and his staff are constantly cooking up fresh ideas as well.
The new exhibit that we've done in the last couple of months, Country Music Backstage, lets us put some great new things on display. The Judd's costumes and their 1987 appearance on the CMA Awards show, and Keith Whitley's motorcycle, a favorite item of his that appeared in a 1988 music video that enhanced his career shortly before his death.
Country music is as vital a part of Nashville's life force as its water supply, and the Hall of Fame serves as a reservoir of preservation for this world-cherished music. With a country tune playing on the radio, we set out for the Natchez Trace Parkway. The parkway isn't immediately accessible from Nashville yet, so we took an easy detour south on I-65 and west on Route 412 to the picturesque little town of Columbia, Tennessee. Our 11th president, James Polk, lived in Columbia for many years, until, of course, Washington, D.C. beckoned. In Columbia, we took 50 west to link up with the parkway. The old Natchez Trace was tread and traveled for thousands of years, but the steamboat era eventually brought the demise of the trail. Carolyn Vance Smith, author of numerous articles about the Natchez Trace, explains how a parkway came to be built alongside it.
About 1901, there was an article that came out in a national magazine, and in the article, the person was writing about the old Natchez Trace. And this spurred the romantic idea in lots of people's minds. Why don't we save it? And so the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution and other patriotic groups set up the idea that it should be saved. They lobbied, they got money, and so in 1934, after long time, in the Great Depression, they got the authorization from Congress for the Natchez Trace to become a parkway.
The first noteworthy stop at the northern end of the Natchez Trace Parkway sits at mile marker 407. Gordon House, built in the early 1800s by ferry operator John Gordon, is one of the few remaining buildings alongside the trace. Just ahead, there's a conspicuous old tobacco barn, but lurking quietly behind it, camouflaged by fresh spring foliage, lies a drivable portion of the old trace. A few miles down, the ghosts of Grinder House will forever hold the answer to the mystery of the eerie, unexplained death of Meriwether Lewis, of Lewis and Clark fame. In 1809, the famed explorer was shot while staying at the inn. It has never been discovered whether it was murder or suicide. Continuing down the trace, babbling brooks murmured softly along the roadside. But as we entered Alabama, we were confronted with the fierce waters of the Tennessee River. Once considered the most treacherous part of a trek on the trace, crossing the river is a lot easier now thanks to the addition of the John Coffey Memorial Bridge. Back then, George Colbert's ferry was pretty much the only option you had, other than swimming. Human obstacles greeted travelers on the trace as well.
Names stand out in the outlaw lore. One is the name of the Harp brothers, H-A-R-P-E. Big Harp, was really Micajah Harp, and Little Harp was his younger brother. They were transplants from the Kentucky area, finally down into the Natchez area. But on the way, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, they began leading a life of lawlessness with their sister and their wives. They were so ruthless and horrible that at one point, one of them had a small child who cried incessantly. And because Big Harp was sick of hearing the child cry, he simply took him by his ankles, are you ready for this, and bashed the child's head against the nearby tree. Did not look back.
A determined posse eventually caught up with Big Harp, and an order went out to hang Little Harp until he was, quote, dead, dead, dead. Our first quest off the parkway took us a few miles east on Highway 6. There lies Tupelo, Mississippi, an unlikely-looking hometown for the king of rock and roll. It so happens that Tupelo's most famous native son is the king himself, Elvis Presley. Elvis was born in a two-room house built by his father Vernon with $180 he had scraped together. Elvis's dear friend, Janelle McComb, the woman largely responsible for preserving his childhood home, spoke to us of the legend's humble beginnings.
He used to come back and he would look at the house and he'd say, you know, I can take these two rooms and put them in the living room at Grayson. But we always say that you can tell where a man's going when you see where he starts. And he reached the height. He reached the zenith of everything that everybody had wanted to achieve. And he had parents who loved him, and he had friends who cared. And he left Tupelo, but he never left this house. With his gregarious giving, his caring, and his sharing, he only changed house numbers.
Elvis's memory survives throughout Tupelo. Here at the hardware store where he bought his first guitar, and at the fairgrounds where he won second prize in a talent contest singing Old Shep. His elementary school is still here, and RCA, his record company, has come in and dedicated a plaque acknowledging his favorite lookout.
Elvis Presley, to me, was a phenomenon. He had this rare ability to, when he walked on the stage, you became a part of all he'd acquired. He gave hope and inspiration to all of those who dared to dream an impossible dream. He made you feel like you were really somebody. And maybe the good fare would touch you and make it come true like it did for him.
Continuing our journey down the Natchez Trace Parkway, we stumbled upon a plantation home called French Camp, named for the French traders that used to frequent the area. In the fall, French Camp's mill churns out delicious sweet sorghum. A few miles below French Camp, at Coal Creek, there's a trail leading into an exquisite Tupelo bald cypress swamp, allowing for an up-close look at nature's wondrous ways. After reaching the town of Kosciuszko, named for the Polish general Kosciuszko, we veered off the trace for a while. Our detour took us to Vaughn, Mississippi, where chairmaker Greg Harkins has been carving out quite a name for himself. Greg has set up shop in a lively old farmhouse on Possum's Bend. And Greg, who once aspired to be a brain surgeon, couldn't be happier.
I think the one thing that captivated me more than anything else is turning on the lathe. It's almost a hypnotic kind of thing. You know, you can have all the troubles in the world, you know, like that, and you can come in and start turning parts, and before long, there's really nothing in the world other than what you're doing. You know, it's just kind of therapeutic or something.
Greg's chairs have graced the homes of everyone from Ronald Reagan and George Bush to Bob Hope and George Burns. What distinguishes his from the others?
Basically the fact that I make them. You know, it's not Greg Harkins' factory. It is the fact that I am an intricate part in the chair itself. And without me, there is no chair.
From Greg's, it's just a straight shot south on I-55 to Mississippi's capital city, Jackson. just a quick ride west on Route 20 led us to Vicksburg, Mississippi. Vicksburg served as an unwilling host to one of the Civil War's fiercest battles. In 1863, the Union Army laid siege to the town for 47 cheerless days. Remnants of the siege have been passionately preserved at the old Courthouse Museum, as a tour with museum director Gordon Cotton revealed.
One of the things I'd like to show you in the museum, for example, is the display on Confederate currency. When it was printed in 1861 through 1864, it became relatively worthless because of inflation. Not enough gold to back it up. And for years it was considered worthless, but today it's quite collectible. This is a pretty good broad collection of Confederate currency from the 1860s. Over here I have something else I'd like to show you. During the siege of Vicksburg, which lasted 47 days, people were without just about everything, food, clothing, so on, that they were running out of and had to really scrimp and save. One of the things that they missed was their daily newspaper. There was no newsprint in town, and so Editor Swords of the Daily Citizen rectified that by printing the newspaper on wallpaper.
Our turn through the old courthouse with Gordon was fascinating, as was our visit to the Vicksburg National Military Park, site of the actual battle. A 14-mile paved road provides easy access to the park, where hundreds of monuments donated by states from north and south stand as memorials to Civil War casualties. Welcome back to Vicksburg, Mississippi. Terry Weinberger is the present owner of Balfour House, one of the few antebellum homes to survive the siege of Vicksburg. Her home happened to play an exciting role in the war.
In 1850, the Balfour family bought the house, and of course it was during their time that the house acquired its fame. Mrs. Balfour is very famous for the diary that she kept during the siege of Vicksburg. The house is also famous for the Confederate Christmas ball that the Balfours were holding on Christmas Eve. It was a few minutes past midnight when a messenger burst into the front door bringing the news that the Union gunboats had been spotted coming down the river. General Martin Luther Smith was in attendance that night. He was the commanding general at the time. He immediately called the ball to a halt, and the soldiers all left in haste to prepare for the Battle of Chickasaw Bayou, which was 3 miles north of the city. They won that battle against overwhelming odds. That was the only battle that Sherman lost.
The Weinbergers have so accurately restored Balfour House to its original state that they won an award of merit for their efforts a few years back. After an absorbing journey through 19th century Vicksburg, we jumped back to the present and headed over to Top of the River for some deep-fried catfish. Catfish down here is all farm-hatched, and it's delicious. The side dishes are just as tasty. Hush puppies, jalapeno cornbread, fried dill pickles and onion rings, and of course, there's the requisite pitcher of ice-cold beer to wash it all down. We are talking a great meal.
Welcome to the Top of the River.
Thank you, sir.
It's great.
At long last, we made our way back to the Natchez Trace Parkway, taking Route 61 south to Port Gibson, the town that General Grant said was too beautiful to burn. The essence of the Deep South prevails on the final leg of the trace. Two of the Trace's best sights down at this end of the ride were fascinating. There's Mount Locust, the only inn still standing from old Trace days. The rooms have been filled with period furniture and give a strong sense of what it must have been like to stay here. At mile marker 10, Emerald Mound quietly stands ready to amaze the next visitor. The mound, built around 1400, covers 8 acres of land. The Natchez Indians used Emerald Mound as a religious center. The tail end of the trace is still in the works, but Route 61 South takes you right into Natchez, Mississippi. Natchez, the oldest town on the Mississippi, retains the spirit of life on the river better than any place. It's a colorful town, even in the thick of winter, but it really shines during pilgrimage time. The charismatic citizens of Natchez have been welcoming folks to their spring pilgrimage since 1932, when the local garden club ladies decided to take advantage of the many antebellum homes in the area. Over half a century later, the pilgrimage has become a big money enterprise, with dozens of opulent homes, many moonlighting as bed and breakfasts, open for public viewing. One of pilgrimage's most unusual offerings is Longwood, an octagonal home built by wealthy cotton planter Dr. Haller Nutt. Longwood was yet another casualty of the war between the states. All of Longwood's craftsmen were Northerners and quickly headed home as the first shots rang out from Fort Sumter. The house remains eerily as it was at the time of their hasty departure. The pinnacle of pilgrimage has always been the Confederate pageant, an impressive spectacle that chronicles pre-war Natchez.
The pageant is a very interesting part of the Natchez pilgrimage. Hundreds of our people here in town give their time, spend lots of money on the costumes, and they're very, very picky that they be exactly right.
Well, that about wraps up our leisurely stroll down and around the Natchez Trace Parkway, where history leaps at you from all sides. We hope our little armchair adventure has enticed you to want to get out and experience the back roads of America firsthand. I'm Steve Fox. I'll see you on our next American road trip.